Sybil! She's bad. She's bad. Come here. Sybil! Hi, please don't poop on me. Okay, come here. This is how this works, okay? You little dirt balls. Sybil, put your wing away. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Of Feathers and Fiction. Thanks so much for being patient with me while I get this video put together. I wanted to introduce you guys really quick to two of my new feathery companions, and that is Sybil here, the white one, and this is Fig, the brown one. Look how cute they are. They're just babies. They're about 6 weeks old, and they're very dirty right now. These two I named, as I'm sure you can tell, names inspired from The Night and the Moth, which is the book that we are going to be talking about today. I loved it, hands down. There's obviously some things I could critique about it, but I really liked the story in general. But I wanted to introduce you guys first to my two new little buddies here. They're very sweet. Oh, they're so sweet. They'll be in future videos as they get a little bit bigger. It's kind of tough on them right now because they're just small. So I'm gonna go get Poppy, and Poppy's gonna hang out with us for the rest of the video. But here's my two new buds, little cutie patooties. We are back. I got Poppy. She's gonna hang out with us today. I wanted to say really quick before we got started that I really appreciate everybody being patient with me while I get this video put together. I'm growing a human being right now, so sitting down in my office chair for long periods of time to do all the outline work is really challenging for me right now. And it's summer, so it's just been busy. I don't make any money doing YouTube, so this is a little bit more of like a hobby for me at this point. I'd love for it to turn into something more, but you know, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I do sincerely appreciate everybody who's here. I appreciate all the new subscribers that I got kind of recently, so it's been really encouraging to see. Growth has been slow, but again, I'm very appreciative of everybody who is here and watching my content and who likes it. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Without further ado, it's mealworm time for Princess Poppy Poopy Pants here, and we're gonna start talking about The Night and the Moth. Let's go. All right, Pops. Oh, again, you had to take another dust bath this morning. Oh, Lord. I'm covered in dirt again. Also, another small disclaimer as I'm getting started here. I'm gonna be battling with the massive dump truck loads of rocks that keep going by my house. I don't know if someone's having like a foundation or a house built somewhere up the road, but like there's dump trucks going by my house at all hours of the day at this point, and it's so freaking loud. So again, I apologize for the road noise. I'm working with what I got. This is the prettiest special edition book I have ever gotten from Barnes & Noble to date. I was debating getting it because I have a Fairy Loot subscription, and I knew that Fairy Loot was doing one for the month of May. So I was like, I don't know if I want both, but I absolutely love this cover because as a photographer, videographer, I could tell that this was an actual human being that was shot in 2 different outfits and edited together. And I was like, that's super cool. I would love to do a photo shoot like that. I had to go get the exclusive edition. And I think the edges were really, really pretty. The inside cover, I think that's gorgeous too. I picked this book up and was like, holy crap, this thing's like 10 pounds. It's not 10 pounds. I'm being, you know, a little bit dramatic, but the paper is printed on almost like a cardstock. It's really nice quality. I did get the Fairy Loot edition too, which is also super, super pretty. I do really love it. I will say though, apparently Sybil is the main character. She is based off of Aurora, the music artist. This straight up looks like a picture of Aurora. This does not look like an original drawing to me. So I have some mixed feelings on that one. We have our artwork of Rory in the back. I tried to do like my heavier eyeliner. Obviously I did not smear it like that because I'm not sweaty and gross right now, so it's not smeared down my face, but you know, the effort was put in to give myself some of that smeared eyeliner that Rory has there. This one's cool because this one has a bonus chapter at the end that goes into a part of the book early on from Rory's POV, gives a little more context as to like what was happening, and it was fun. It was fun to read. I was like, okay, cool. I like that. You good? Okay, I'm not sure if Poppy is gonna be game to hang out with us all day. She was trying to sit on eggs. She's in a really odd mood, so she might be too restless to hang out with us today. But, you know, we'll try. Where are you going? Why don't you eat your mealworms? Mealworms? Do you want to hang out with us or no? No? You don't want to hang out. Okay, Poppy does not want to hang out with us today. She would rather go sit on eggs. Lame. Okay, so Poppy didn't want to hang out with us. She wanted to go sit on her eggs, which is a development. Yesterday she was not doing that. Today she is, so super cool. Anyway, let's get started on this review, shall we? One thing that I find really impressive about Rachel Gillig, this is her third book. I think like she gets better with every single book that she writes. Like I really liked her first duology. I was like really impressed with the writing in her very first book. And then I actually kind of liked the second one better because I feel like she did what she did well in the first one, even better in the second one. So I was like, okay, this is super cool to see her getting better and better. Where Rachel Gillig's writing falls a little short for me is the world building. I think it's slightly lacking. With the first two books, we had an interesting magic system, not an overly complicated one, which I actually liked for a change. Sometimes we don't need overly dramatic magic systems. However, the premise of that one was we have to go across the kingdom and collect all the magical artifacts in this world. That was, the main mission in the first book. This book did the same thing. Like the main thing that was putting them in different places around the map was to find the magical artifacts that they needed to acquire. I was hoping that she would take a different path with the magic system and not have that be the exact same premise. Is it, terrible? No, it's not. However, it is different enough in its own way that I think as the story went on, it ended up working out and I really didn't have any issues with it. But those just out of the starting gate are kind of some of the things that I noticed. And I felt like this one I rated a 4.5 star as well. All of her books have been 4.5 stars and they all fall just short of 5 stars for me because I feel like the world building isn't quite enough for me to give it 5 stars. But I love these books. I finished this book, like a month ago. I read it a couple days after it came out and I think about it like all the time. I mean, heck, I named my chickens after characters from this book. So I did really enjoy it. If you liked her first duology, I don't know why you wouldn't like this one. That's just my 2 cents. Let's get started with the review. Sybil Delling has spent 9 years dreaming and having no dreams at all. Like the other foundling girls who traded a decade of service for a home in the great cathedral, Sybil is a diviner. In her dreams, she receives visions from 6 earthly figures known as omens. From them, she can predict terrible things before they occur, and the lords and common folk alike travel across the kingdom of Trom's windswept moors to learn their futures by her dreams. Just as she and her sister diviners near the end of their service, a mysterious knight arrives at the cathedral. Rude, heretical, and devilishly handsome, the knight Roderick has no respect for Sybil's visions. But when Sybil's fellow diviners begin to vanish one by one, she has no choice but to seek his help in finding them. For the world outside the cathedral's cloister is wrought with peril. Only the gods have the answers she is seeking, and as much as she'd rather avoid Roderick's dark eyes and sharp tongue, only a heretic can defeat a god. So the book starts out with a quick prologue just called Aisling Cathedral. It has this kind of iconic beginning that I see a lot of people quoting. You know the story, Bartholomew, though you do not remember it. I'll tell it to you as best I can and promise to be honest in my tale bearing. If I'm not, that's hardly my fault. To tell a story is in some part to tell a lie. One thing that I did really enjoy about this book is that the chapters have chapter names, which we don't see a ton in most books nowadays, so that it was a fun switch up. So chapter 1 is called 6 Maidens Upon a Wall. So we have our main character, Sybil Delling. She is one of 6 girls. They were all orphans. They were taken into this cathedral by a woman called the Abbess. So these 6 girls were brought in as young children to become diviners, and diviners are this world's prophetess type thing. So people come to the cathedral to have their futures read by these girls, and in order to do that they have to like cut their hand. The diviner has to like lick the hand. You have to give them your name, and then the abbess, who's like the head of this cathedral, she forces these girls to drown in this spring of like rotten smelling kind of water. When they drown, they go into this other realm, this dream realm, and they're able to read the signs that are inside the dreams. So there's 6 omens that they basically consult to get these dreams deciphered, if that makes sense. Much like in the first duology where she had all of the cards and all the cards had different powers and stuff, in this book she's got omens and she has a coin, an inkwell, an oar, a chime, a loomstone, and then there's the 6th one is called the Moth. These all, when they show up, mean different things, and that's so the diviner's job is to read the omens and give people their fortunes, like basically like that. If you get like bad omens, like the band, if you get bad omens, it's like not great. The people in this kingdom view the diviners as like divine beings. They want blessing to be read to them by the diviners because they want to succeed in life. These 6 girls have a lot of pressure and expectations put upon them. But they're also kept permanently like inside this cathedral, so they're not allowed to really leave. They don't have friends outside. They're human, but they're made to seem like they're these spiritual beings. They all wear these little shrouds across their eyes to hide their eyes, and nobody knows why at first they're expected to wear these all the time. Things are so rigid that they have to wear the shroud at all times, and they're commanded not to even look at their eyes for some reason. It's kind of cool because the shroud gives a sense of mystery, like why do they have their eyes covered? Like what are they hiding under there? And so initially they think that, you know, if you see their eyes, like bad things will come because they can see and read your dreams. So like you can't make eye contact with them. I don't know. It creates like a sense of mystery, even though, to be honest, these are just human girls and it's more of a facade to give them that mysterious air than it really is anything to do with like power and stuff. In the first chapter, we meet Sybil. She's sneaking away from this particularly sassy gargoyle who refers to her as Bartholomew. Now this gargoyle, he's like the most talkative of the bunch. There's other gargoyles that live at the cathedral as well, but they don't really have any personalities and they don't really talk. This gargoyle is bat-like in appearance and he is chatty and sassy. So Sybil is sneaking away from the sassy gargoyle to go find her other sisters, her other maidens. She's walking through this very picturesque sounding cathedral type area. There's an apple orchard outside. She grabs an apple on her way over to the cathedral walls. And that's where the rest of her sisters are sitting. Numbers 1 through 6. So all of their names, like they technically had real names, but they go by literal number names, which is super cool. So the other girls are all perched along the top of this cathedral wall. And they're like, hey, hurry up 6. Sibyl's number 6. They're like, hey, hurry up 6. The king's procession is coming. Turns out the king was coming to the cathedral to be divined for. And the king is new. He's just recently taken over for, I believe was it his grandfather? Was it his grandfather? So this boy king, this 17-year-old kid, he wants to win the approval of the kingdom, so he's going to have his dreams read for him to appease everybody. The girls draw straws to see who will divine for the king. Sybil ends up pulling the short straw. Sybil is very much the martyr of the group. She divines the most out of all of them. Like, she's the abbess's favorite. So because she doesn't thrash around in the water while she's being drowned, the king is approaching with his knighthood, and one of the banner men notices the girls sitting up on the wall and starts like hooting and hollering, calling out to them. And more of them are like joining in and begging for a kiss and, you know, flirting with them. The cathedral bells in the distance ring. This is their call to go to the cathedral. Sybil remains seated on the wall for just a hint of a second. Her attention is roused by this knight beneath her. His horse is distracted by an apple that she was eating earlier that ended up not being all that tasty, so they threw it over the wall. So this knight is stopped and his horse is eating the apple. He's trying to get his horse to, like, you know, walk forward, and the horse ignores him. Then the knight finally notices that Sybil is still sitting up on the wall. And this fine gentleman, here's a little text for you. He has sharp features, dark brows, a prominent nose. Yes, Rachel Gillig, she likes her men with prominent noses, and as a big nose girly, I approve. His skin was olive, golden from the sun, yet there was no warmth in his face. Light caught along 3 gold bands pierced into his right ear. Severe, rimmed in charcoal, his eyes were so brown they might easily be mistaken for black. There was no warmth in them either. Yes, guy liner. This knight doesn't seem interested in flirting or smiling. Sybil tells him that he and, you know, his knighthood make quite the spectacle, implying that the king's entourage seems to be a bit excessive for a divination. I think that's how you would say that. And the knight's like, well, you're one to talk because, like, look at you as, like, your facade that you wear. Sybil says, a respectable knight would never speak to a daughter of Aisling in such a manner. Just then they're interrupted by the sassy gargoyle who's yelling for Sybil to come to the cathedral. The gargoyle refers to Sybil and everyone else, I think I mentioned this, as Bartholomew, but no one is sure why. Sybil reluctantly climbs down from the wall and she heads to the cathedral where the abbess is waiting for her. So the abbess is the mysterious figurehead of Aisling Cathedral. She is covered from head to toe in this like gossamer type gown, so nobody really knows what she looks like. She's displeased by the king's sudden arrival, apparently not thinking very much of Benedict Castor III. Sybil changes into her divining robes. They're a sheer silky white gown all diviners wear during this ritual. In the center of this cathedral is a spring. It's dark, oily water, stinks of like rotting flowers, and that's what Sybil has to drown in. Above her on the cathedral ceiling is the like stained glass imagery of the omens, which I had mentioned before is a coin, an inkwell, an oar, a chime, and a loomstone. And the 6th and final window depicts something like that, like the delicate wings of a moth. 6 gargoyles come in and position themselves around the spring, like the hour markers on a sundial. And then when the king comes in, he literally pays them. This is kind of interesting. He pays them money to have his dreams divined. So he tells the Abbess that he's doing this because he wants to gain the favor of the kingdom. He comes off as a very unsure, young, insecure king. A boy, which technically he kind of is because he is 17. Sybil enjoys seeing people vulnerable. It gives her this sensation that she's wiser and stronger standing in the Isling Spring. So she kind of has a little bit of an elevated ego in that she's like, well, I truly am a diviner. Like I am something kind of spectacular. I am something to be revered. So she kind of likes having that power over people. The Abbess hands the knife, this like ritual knife, to the king, and he has to like slice his hand. Chapter 2 is called Omens. So as I briefly mentioned before, for the ritual to take place, the person must slice their palm open. The diviner drinks the blood. This is a sacred act and giving a bit of oneself up for the art of divination. The Abbess then gives an oration of the history of the kingdom of Trom, and she asks the king first if he's even interested in this part of the ritual or if he would just like to proceed with the dream. The king insists he'd like to do things properly. So basically, the kingdom of Trom consists of 5 hamlets. They were full of monstrous creatures. The hamlets tried to retain order and couldn't, as they had no unity among each other, no gods, no ruler. One night, this orphan child found the spring. They found out it had like these magical qualities, and then a cathedral was built around it. So the child drank from the spring, was thrown into a dream. In this dream, the child saw 6 unearthly figures who bore stone objects and bore unique powers. Then the child began telling people about these dreams, which roused the community's interest. Over time, the child learned the movements of these stone objects were omens and became fluent reading those for other people. So each omen has its own godlike person that is in charge of that omen. So the coin is the artful brigand, the inkwell is the harried scribe, the stone oar is the ardent oarsman, the chime is the faithful forester, the loomstone is the heart-sore weaver, and then the moth bears no stone object. Some say it shows itself just before you're born or just before you die. It's kind of a mystery. So a great cathedral was built around spring, and more children were brought in and turned into diviners to read more dreams because, hey, it turned out to be profitable. Got to cash in on that child labor, am I right? This act alone unified the kingdom, Trom, I think I'm saying that right, and created the Stone Water Kingdom. So it kind of unified all these hamlets together into one kingdom. So during the oration, that knight that we saw earlier with the thick guy liner, he abruptly gets up and leaves the cathedral. And Sybil sees him go and is like, I knew he was an ignoble knight from the start. With the oration complete, Sybil lies back in the spring, and the Abbess literally shoves her underwater and makes her drown. The process of dreaming sounds rather harrowing, and the diviners do this day in and day out. You can get injured and like experience really horrific visions and stuff like that. Does not sound like happy fun times. Sybil reads the dream and is told that the omens do not favor King Castor. So this young king got like all the bad omens, like every bad omen that you can get. He got them all. Chapter 3 is called The Foulest Night in all of Trom. So Sybil tells us that her name is actually Sybil Delling, or at least it was, because now she is just referred to as Six. She's a foundling girl, aka an orphan. She has no recollection of a life at all before she came to the cathedral. So the Abbess told Sybil that she was a sick little girl before the Abbess took her in. She had asked if she wanted to become a diviner and serve 10 years of her life in exchange for her, the Abbess, to love and care. She's like, I'm gonna take in this orphan child and I'm gonna proposition them like, would you like a home? Would you like love? Would you like affection? Great, I'll give it to you. However, that's conditional on if you can serve and make me money. That's the dynamic we got going on here. She gives very much Mother Knows Best from Tangled. Like, as I was reading this, I was like, Mother knows best. Listen to your mumsy. It's a scary world out there. Like, that's how I picture the Abbess in my mind. Sybil is reflecting on her, like, becoming a diviner, and it's not super great. It says, and then she drowned me. After I was sick, the Abbess held me in her arms and told me that the spring was holy and magical, and that by drowning in it, I had become holy and magical too, forever changed. That my memory had washed from me the moment the water had touched my lips, as if I had been reborn again, aka baptized. She called me strange, special, new. More importantly, she called me hers, and said it was such pride that I spent my days chasing her approval that I might hear it again. She soothed my stringy, silvery hair from my eyes and tied a strip of gossamer around them, telling me I would not be safe outside the cathedral because people in Trom wanted holy things for themselves. She bade me to guard my face, my name, until my 10 years at Isling Cathedral were at an end. There are so many issues here with this power dynamic. Sybil promised herself She wouldn't forget her name. That's like the one thing that she has that's hers. But the years come and go. She drowned and she dreamed, and in all that dreaming, she broke her promise and forgot that she was Sybil Delling and just developed I Am Number 6, which, is that a book too? I think it's I Am Number 4. Anyway, the gargoyle wakes Sybil up from her dream. She's completed the divination for the king. As she wakes up, she immediately begins to vomit, and the gargoyle reprimands her for making a mess on the floor because now he has to clean it. And she's like, what are you talking about? You don't have to clean it. I cleaned it earlier. So the gargoyle is like just a sassy little doofus. After the abyss shook me awake, the dream shut off like a flame snuffed. But I was hazy after divination, sometimes for hours. A gargoyle would carry me away from watching eyes to the sacristy. I'm not quite sure what that actually is. And I would lie in a foggy, sedated state. When my mind sharpened, I was always sick. Everything hurt, the muscles on my brow, my jaw, my stomach, sick from ingesting the spring water. There was no mark upon me for the injuries I'd incurred in the dream, but the pain from the broken collarbone from wrung out muscles was still a ghost in my body, which I think that was kind of cool. Like, it's, like I said, it was a kind of a brutal experience, not a fun time. Night has fallen and Sybil heads to the kitchen to get some regular water because she's absolutely thirsty, because the spring water is hot garbage. So she goes to step into the kitchen and she's stopped by this female knight named Moth. Now Moth is another one of our supporting characters. Moth gives us some older representation. I think she's in her 40s. So she's kind of a cool character. I do like Moth. So Moth stops her from entering the kitchen. She's like, listen, you can't go in there. And Sybil's like, you can't tell me what to do. This is my home. So she's surprised to see that Sybil is still awake because the other diviners are already in bed. And she doesn't realize that the diviners need to rest after dreaming. So that's why it's been hours since the dream happened and Sybil is now awake. Sybil hotly tells her that she doubts a simple soldier would understand the complexities of divining, and then immediately regrets her pious attitude. Maud tries to stop her once again from entering the hall, but Sybil like pivots around her and just barges in because this is her home after all. She's immediately given a complete eyeful of attractive unclothed, save for his unlaced trousers, that grumpy knight from the road. Also the one that left the divination earlier. So the two like stare each other down for a minute, and Sybil is still in her divining robe that's basically translucent, and she's naked under it anyway. So horny thoughts are formulating here for sure. Like Sybil's like, wow, that's a work of art. And then he's looking at her like probably the same exact way. I mean, we don't quite know because we don't have his POV in this situation, but she's essentially just like this naked woman in front of him. So he's like, their stare down is interrupted because it turns out the king is actually with these two knights, and that immediately draws Sybil out of her like kind of horny thoughts that she has going on in her head. So Sybil's like, what the heck are you three all doing here alone in the kitchen at night? Like, what's going on here? So her guard is up because this seems strange. The half-naked knight slid off the table. I kept my gaze stubbornly aimed at his face and nothing below it. Not the lean muscle etched into his abdomen, not the sharp V they made over his hip, not the line of dark hair that trailed from his navel into his waistband. Holy diviner or not, an attractive man is an attractive man, girls. The knight says it must be pretty special to be a diviner. Sybil tells him that it's a privilege to divine and to be divined for, and he would know that if he'd stuck around for the ceremony. Because yeah, don't worry, she did not miss his departure. The knight seems surprised that she noticed him leave, and she tells him it was hard not to because of the scene that he made. He left kind of loudly. Maud and the knight make eye contact, and that's when Sybil notices the likely reason his shirt is off, because his ribs are covered in bruises. She immediately is like, what the heck happened to your ribs? Why are you so beat up? And then he tells her like, it's none of your business. The king breaks the tension with a laugh and he offers to get Sybil a glass of water. As he stands, he places a flagon on the table. Sybil immediately catches a whiff, a familiar scent of the spring's water. She knows what that spring tastes and smells like because she has to, drown in it on a daily basis. So the king notices her face pale as she's overcome with the nausea of smelling the spring. Before she can stop herself, she gets sick and vomits all over the knight's boots, which he's quite upset by because these are his favorite boots. After this moment of vulnerability, Sybil takes off across the grass, heading to the cottage that she shares with the diviners. So the knight catches her and he grabs the gate before she can wrench it open and go through. And she's looking down and realizes that like he's removed his boots. He's smoking something from this thin branch. So Sybil asks him quite frankly, like, why does the king have a flagon of spring water? He tries to kind of gaslight her and tell her that she probably just smells herself because she reeks of spring water since she's still wearing her divining robes. The knight casually refers to the king as Benji, which takes Sybil by surprise. He says to Sybil that The king wanted to know if she had been in the cathedral this entire time. And then Sybil's like, yes, I have, because she was resting in the cathedral after she dreamed. So she's like, I don't understand why he's asking me these questions. So as they're conversing, Sybil can tell that this knight does not like the shroud that she wears over her eyes. It kind of unnerves him. He offers her a hit from that branch of whatever it is that he's smoking, saying it will help with the nausea. She tells him that she's not enduring discomfort beyond their conversation, at least. He smiled back, equally hostile. His teeth were white, straight, except for the front bottom three, which were crowded. A pallid row of disorganized soldiers. Were he to bite me, I imagined the indent would be as unique as his fingerprint. So yeah, the branch is called idleweed. He offers her the idleweed again, asking if it's a sign of misfortune to smoke under the moon. She tells him not everything is a sign. He says that she could have fooled him because he can't go anywhere without hearing, how everything basically is a sign or an omen. So the knight clearly does not believe in Isling's system. He admits it's clever and effective because it can manipulate everyone to bend to it, and he says, the stone objects the omens are known for are common, their portents vague. The margin of error and misinterpretation is so wide, my horse would die of starvation trying to get from one end to the other. And yet this cathedral, this hallowed ground, is the only place in Trom where people can justify that wasting one's life looking for signs is a life well spent. They pay hard-earned coin to do so. As somebody who grew up around like religious people and prosperity gospel, I have lots of thoughts on those types of viewpoints. These words to Sybil are straight blasphemy, and she labels this knight as vile, unworthy, indecent, the foulest knight in all of Trom. She angrily tells him it's not a waste and that divination takes away the pain of the unknown. She takes in this lungful of idleweed as he asks what her name is, and she refuses to answer and then asks what his name is, and he introduces himself as Roderick Mendacious, but she can call him Rory. I made the comment that mendacious just rolls off the tongue so nicely. I'm like, well, I really like saying that. Sybil's eyes water as she takes in some of the smoke and her lungs turn itchy, and she like hacks into her sleeve, and this makes Rory's mouth twitch a little bit because he's obviously amused. She then tells him my name is 6, which he tells her is a number and not a name, and I would agree. The idleweed smoke leaves her feeling a little fuzzy, and the nausea does start to dissipate. So realizing the magic of idleweed, she eagerly inhales another puff. Rory like takes it away from her, and he's like, okay, you've had enough. She tells him they don't go by their real names. Rory reasons that that's why they don't show their eyes either. It's a secret. Sybil doesn't respond to that because she doesn't even know why they keep their eyes covered. So Rory concludes it must be a secret why no one else but diviners drink the spring's water. Sybil tells him that someone did try to attempt to drink from the spring years ago, but he was knocked out by a gargoyle and then proceeded to vomit until he was like sobbing. So it's poisonous to anybody who is not a diviner, basically. She tells him the king can go ahead and drink his stolen spring water, but Rory had better watch his boots because, you know, he might. Rory scowls at her and tells her that she might know all about the omens, but she doesn't know anything about life outside of Isling's wall. She's in for a rude awakening when her tenure is up. Sybil angrily reminds him she serves the gods while he serves a mediocre boy king. She turns abruptly on her heel and heads back to her cottage. He mockingly tells her it's been a privilege making her acquaintance as he walks away. And Sybil lays in her bed that night and just seethes. So yeah, they had this pretty like heated back and forth conversation. He thinks her whole way of life is a complete joke. Chapter 4, blackmail, for instance. The next morning, all of the girls are gossiping about which knights they snuck out with the night before. So the girls seem sexually liberated despite their sheltered life. The dynamic between all the girls is kind of fun. It's kind of silly. There's some dialogue that's written that I think portrays young girls in their late teens to early 20s. I think it just kind of showcases just the silliness that girls can have together, and it kind of brings up that like sisterhood type vibe. The gargoyles are the only ones allowed to travel to Trom to do the abbess's bidding. These girls do live very sheltered lives, but they still get out there and, you know, accomplish certain things. They just sneak around. Yeah, the diviners aren't even allowed to have visitors come to their cottage, so for any nightly rendezvous, they have to sneak out. Even still, having lovers is a fairly lonely ordeal as they have to keep up this mysticism even when they're with somebody else. So Sybil recalls how she's been with a couple men and women, but none of them seemed to treat her with actual respect. The last man she was with was a respectful knight, but he made her feel like her pleasure was a task he failed to complete. So she didn't feel the tenderness that comes after a climax, so she just has chosen to stop being with anybody anymore. Like, she needs that level of intimacy and doesn't enjoy the hollowness of these interactions, so she's kind of sworn off from messing around with anybody. I told myself it was better sharpening the qualities that made me divine than those that made me human, even if in a deep, ugly place. I worried I'd made that choice because I did not know how to be human. I was the most uncomplaining diviner, ever good in the eyes of the abbess, Eisen Cathedral's best daughter. But when it came to being worldly or vulnerable or even fun, I was an abysmal failure. I can kind of relate to that. Growing up, I was very much a people pleaser. I was always called like a prude and boring because I was always so afraid of doing the wrong thing and then facing repercussions for doing the wrong thing. So I just was like, I was very easy, low key. So I kind of relate to Sybil in this. So the abbess comes into the cottage, sits down next to Sybil on her bed. She tells them not to concern themselves with the king of Castor, the politics of the hamlets, or the world outside of Eisen Cathedral. So the abbess informs the maidens the gates open an hour for divination and they need to get ready, then leaves the cottage. So that's their day. That's their day in and day out. People come to the cathedral to be divined for, and the girls just drown and dream, and that's their existence. So after the abbess leaves, Sybil asks how many months left are in their service. 5 says there's about 2 months left. Sybil tells them that the abbess says they're not to concern themselves with the outside world, but she wants to know what it's like out there and wants to sneak out. The reason why Sybil wants to do this is largely because Rory's teasing the night before and him just saying like, well, you're just like a pious brat and you don't know anything about what's outside these walls. You're in for a rude awakening in the real world. So the other girls are dumbfounded that Sybil wants to break rules and sneak out. And she admittedly feels a little guilty about it. So the girls wonder how they'll sneak out without getting apprehended and without being noticed for what they are by like the public. And Sybil tells them she'll be right back if she has an idea of someone who could escort them. She hurries her tush over to the kitchen. Sybil pushes her way into the commons searching for Rory, but she finds the boar of a man sitting with Benji and Moth. So clearly these three are thick as thieves, best buds. She tells the king she needs a favor from Rory. Meanwhile, Rory, sitting there, looking fabulous. He'd drawn fresh charcoal around his eyes and secured his black hair with a strip of leather. His clothes were clean and there was even a whit of warmth in his cheeks. Daylight and an obvious bath had made a new man of him. I had a rousing vision of crashing my hammer into his skull. I want to smash him with my hammer! Is there a double potential meaning to what I just said? Okay, anyway, so Sybil tells him that what he inferred about her not knowing anything about the outside world, she would like to remedy that by having him escort her and the other diviners to Coulson Fair, which is one of the other hamlets towns that are nearby. Rory tells her simply no. She might have ridden other knights hard and put them away wet, but he's no one's errand boy. He says this now, okay? He says, I'm not an errand boy. We'll get back to that. Maud and Benji are shocked by his bold statement and refusal. Maud interjects to clarify that they're leaving for Coulson Fair in an hour and wouldn't be able to escort the maidens. Sybil reaches for her blackmail and tells them that if you don't escort her and the girls, she'll inform the gargoyles that the king stole water out of the spring. They're not going to be very happy about that. Rory and Sybil argue with one another, putting on a good show for the entire room, but he still refuses. Sybil spends the rest of the morning on the east wall, smashing things and cursing Rory. Her gargoyle friend, who's supposed to be helping her mix mortar and help mend the stone, is instead picking flowers. So when the bell chimes 12, she puts away her hammer and chisel and she goes to the cathedral. The dormitory stables are empty. The king and his knights are gone. So much for sneaking out. Sybil spends the rest of the day reading dreams and drowning. Later on, she's sitting outside with one, I'm saying that as a name, capital O, one outside the cottage gate and notices a stack of 6 idleweed twigs and a note telling her to be ready by nightfall and to not smoke all the idleweed. So Rory did come through after all. We move into the next part of the book called Coulson Fair, Chapter 5, Sprites in the Glen. The girls smoke all the idleweed, none to be left, and they're having a jolly good time. Later on, true to his word, Rory shows up with 5 other knights and they are there to collect the girls. The other knights appear more thrilled to be doing this task. Rory is very begrudging about it. Each maiden is assigned a knight. That way, so the group climbs up and over the wall. While walking on the road, they are joined by sprites that are small as hummingbirds, their bodies brightly feathered and iridescent. In this kingdom, there's like a different type of sprite that lives in each area. There's like a native sprite to each area. And the sprites are often like regarded as pests, and the knights and regular people really hate them. So they don't really live very harmoniously together. One of them like darts overhead, hissing at the knights. One of the knights draws a sword and smashes the sprite with the pommel of the sword. Sybil is really shocked by this show of violence. The knight assigned to her, his name is Hamlin. He tells her large or small, all sprites are violent and impossible to control. As they pass this fallen sprite, Sybil remarks that it shouldn't have been killed and that it's still so beautiful and lovely even in death. And he says to her, not as lovely as you, diviner. Dude, like, shut up. This comment earns a snort from one who asks Hamlin if he was the one that she kissed the night before. Another knight pipes up and he's like, no, it was me. And then one apologizes and says that they all look the same to her, which I laughed at that comment. One there is she's pretty sassy. Wanting to prove that she's capable of human emotion, Sybil takes Hamlin's hand, telling one she's going to take a turn with him in the grass. Really what she's doing also is she knows Rory is watching her and she wants to prove him wrong so badly. Hamlin is more than eager to go take a roll with her in the grass. She kisses him. He tells her she is truly lovely, fearsome almost. His words are kind, but she's not feeling the moment, even with him touching her. Hamlin asks if diviners marry, and Sybil says she's honestly not sure. And he says, imagine the influence, he murmured against my mouth, being wedded to a daughter of Aisling. Sybil basically tells him to shut up. Let's get this over with. He chuckled breathfully, his hand rising up my leg. Sorry, I'm a little overwhelmed. His teeth grazed the bottom of my lip. No one back home in the peaks is going to believe I f***ed a diviner. What a crass thing for you to say! Sybil abruptly pulls away from him, noting how cold everything feels now. She tells him she'd rather remain practically fearsome than be someone he f***ed in the glen. Hamlin tried to grin. Surely you could be both. Would you still be able to take pleasure knowing I was not enjoying myself? Yes, girl, speak up for yourself. Advocate for yourself. Don't take this BS. He looks so disappointed that Sybil has put this potential tryst to a stop. She almost considers apologizing, and I'm like, don't. He asked then if he can at least see her eyes or have her name, some token to prove that they were together. She just leaves him panting on the ground by himself. That whole interaction made me rather uncomfortable. Chapter 6, hit me as hard as you can. This is one of my favorite chapters. Once they're inside Coulson Fair, Sybil is given a difficult reminder of how she's regarded by the common people because she's a diviner. She comes across a merchant selling these intricately carved limestone busts of people. Not just this, you know what I mean? Like a bust. This is considered like from here to here. So Sybil has an interest in masonry work and tries to start a conversation with this man because she wants to learn a little bit more. He tells her if she's not going to buy, he's not interested in speaking with her until he looks up and sees that she's got the shroud over her eyes and she's a diviner. He immediately catches her wrist and tells her that he's on hard times, but if a diviner gave him an endorsement and said that the omen favored him, that would be a blessing. Sybil's like, whoa, okay, this is a little bit intense. She tells him to let her go, but he refuses, pleading with her that all he needs is a sign. Suddenly, she feels a presence at her back, and it's Rory. He asks Maud if he should take the man's hand or his throat. Maud offers, why not both? Sybil tells Rory he's a brute and this whole interaction was just a misunderstanding and there's no need for violence. Rory plays like he's going to stab the merchant when Sybil realizes he's teasing her. Rory tells her she's dumb for thinking he'd just kill a merchant and that she doesn't really know anything at all. All of a sudden, violence doesn't seem like such a bad thing. She again wants to just like slap him across the face. Rory tells this trembling merchant to keep his mouth shut about seeing Sybil because otherwise the next time he comes to his stall he will not be so pleasant. Maud hands Sybil a cup of ale and tells her to ignore Rory. Sybil takes a big swig of ale, noting its effect felt better than kissing Hamlin, which I just wanted to make that note because that made me laugh really hard. Maud tells her that she shouldn't have been by herself and asks, who was your assigned knight? And Rory tells her it was Hamlin, and then they were waylaid in the glen. Sybil scoffs that it was nice of Rory to notice her go. He says it was hard to miss with the show she made. So again, I know I've mentioned this before, but I think Rachel Gilly does a really good job of like, if a character says something in previous chapters, she like always brings it back around, especially if it's like a teasing type thing or a joke. And it makes it feel like these characters form these inside jokes with one another. So it makes the dialogue feel more dynamic and real. And then I love the way this sentence is written. Like an ill-timed sneeze, Hamlin stepped into the walkway, followed by the rest of the diviners and their respective knights. There you are, one called, spotting me. She glanced at Hamlin and chuckled. That was one quick roll in the grass. Hamlin turned a violent shade of red, then disappeared behind a row of tents. Rory downed his ale, tossed the cup on the grass, and stepped after him. I like how Rachel paints a picture without telling us the innuendos or intentions of characters. We know Hamlin is embarrassed and probably pissed about being rejected by a diviner nonetheless. Rory doesn't say anything at all when he sees Hamlin, but we do know that he's pissed, and we know that as he's stepping off after Hamlin that he's going to do something about it. One, who's oblivious to Sybil's complete ire, pulls her toward a pyre where there is music being played. All the diviners are barefoot in the grass, dancing joyfully, and they're letting loose. They're having a good time. More ale is consumed. The dancing continues until it's just the diviners around the pyre. The other knights have gathered around, including Hamlin, who has a new bruise on his jaw, which again, I like how Rachel made note of that detail because we're like, we didn't see it happen, but we know that Rory socked him real good. And this is a small detail worth paying attention to because it shows that Hamlin really dislikes Rory and Rory really dislikes him, and how that creates more tension between those two characters as the story goes on. So Sybil, as she's dancing around, she takes notice of Rory talking with his fellow knights, and he's just openly smiling and having a good time. The sight of him smiling makes her pulse stumble. Another song begins, and the diviners shed their cloaks. The king steps into the circle, so to speak, and links hands with Sybil and asks if she'll dance with him. So the two dance around the fire, and Benji thanks her for not telling anyone about the fact that he stole spring water. He said he'd like to explain his motives for doing such a thing, but tells her it's something that needs to be seen. He tells her he would like to pay her back. He calls Rory forward and challenges him at his craft. So the diviners have heard of no such thing, and Moth explains that every person in every hamlet has a craft. So a challenge to one's craft is a kind of duel to test their skills and their honor. So if you're challenged to your craft, you kind of have to rise to it. You can't like bow out. If Rory doesn't accept the challenge, the knights will chase him through the field naked. If he accepts the challenge and loses, he does whatever Benji tells him. If Rory wins, Benji gets to strip naked and run through the field. 3 grand sounds like a happy ploy to get everyone's clothes off. Nice. Benji challenges Rory to his knightly craft of war by keeping his footing through 3 assaults. If he falters or is knocked over, he must return to Aisling and have his future divined, which is like, ooh, because we all know he's kind of a heretic. So Rory accepts so as long as he chooses who will assault him. So he chooses the diviners. Benji agrees, but to sweeten the deal, he ties Rory's hands behind his back. So he's at a little bit of a disadvantage. The girls huddle. Sybil says that they should pummel him. 2 points out that they don't even know him, but 5 reminds them that he was rude to 6, aka Sybil. So they're like, let's take this guy down. So 1, 4, and 6 agree they're going to be the ones to flatten him. 1 is up first. Sybil tells 1 that Rory's ribs are injured on the left side and to hit them hard. Okay, Sybil. She's out for blood. So 1 slams her foot into Rory's side, and he definitely feels it, but he keeps his footing. So now it's the next girl's turn. King Castor's finger, slightly wobbled because he's drunk, pointed once more. The pretty one. Rory's eyes flitted to me, but the king's finger, the knighthood's collective gaze, was trained on 4. I just thought this was so cute because, like, you know, the king's like the pretty one, and Rory just goes, what? And he looks right over at Sybil instead, and I'm like, that's such a cute detail. 4 goes for seduction. She knows her strengths, so she goes up to Rory and kisses him square on the mouth. Sybil is really not that thrilled, and the knights are like losing their minds in the background. 4 deepens the kiss, but Rory like doesn't even flinch. 4 pulls away and she's like, huh, that usually works. I can't believe this. Now it's Sybil's turn and Rory's gaze like just locks right in onto her. This is their last shot. The diviners push Sybil forward and Rory tells her that, you know, she looks nervous. And Sybil tells him that if she lets him win, she never has to see him again. So that's victory in and of itself. You are nervous. Why is that, diviner? Thinking of kissing me too? I'd rather put you on your back. Don't threaten me with a good time. I sprang forward. He was indeed a wall that had humiliated me, mocked me, and belittled me.
You want to go toe-to-toe with me, pretty boy?
And even without a hammer, without a chisel, I knew how to mind a stone wall. Bending at the knees, I wrapped my arms around Rory's waist. My thighs trembled and I shut my eyes. The asshole was heavy. Teeth gritted, muscles shuddering, I pressed up, lifted Roderick Mendacious off his feet, took a full step forward, and slammed the 2 of us down onto the grass. I appreciate this detail that Sybil is not a frail woman. She's solidly built. She's not all that much shorter than Rory either, and so girl is built. The knights absolutely lose their mind. Oh my gosh, you got taken out by a girl. Rory lays beneath Sybil. You're a scourge, he groaned, dropping his gaze to my mouth. Wouldn't it have just been easier to kiss me and deny myself any pleasure? He smiled, startling both of us. I love Rachel's dialogue. I'm so good. Chapter 7, The Moth. It's dawn. They've been out all night. Sybil is exhausted, but she goes to rouse the gargoyle because he has to help her divine for Rory. When she wakes him, he just screams. Not sure how that didn't wake everybody else up. So the gargoyle's like, he screams, he cries, he's very dramatic. You don't want to like startle him. So the gargoyle wonders like where the abyss is at. And Sybil expects a lecture from him, but admits that she doesn't want the abyss involved in this rather unorthodox divination. Just as well, sometimes Bartholomew, I think her quite the bitch. She's the
worst. She's the worst person in the world.
Rory eventually shows up. It's clear that he hasn't rested at all. His eyeliner's smeared because he's been rubbing at it. The gargoyle called from the chancel, if you wish to divine before the abyss arrives, best get cracking. May I approach the bitch? So Sybil steps into the spring. She tells Rory she needs his blood, but she forgot her knife. So Rory bites the end of his thumb and breaks the skin, asking if that's good enough. He waits for her permission before pressing his thumb to her mouth. Once again, Rachel's really big on the men in these stories. The male love interest, I should say. She's really big on making her male love interest really big on consent. What name with blood would you give the omens? I whispered. My name is Roderick Mendacious. With shocking gentleness, Rory pressed his bloodied thumb to my lips. The sound of his exhale thrummed through the cathedral. What's yours? I think it's so sweet that in this moment he actually forgets what's really happening and wants to know her actual name. She almost tells him, wants to, but instead lowers herself into the water. She asks for the gargoyle to drown her, but he balks at first since that's the abyss's job, not his. He doesn't seem comfortable with doing this, but regardless does obey. As she goes underwater, she sees Rory gazing down at her with concern in his eyes. Inside Rory's dream, she finds nothing. Then suddenly a moth appears. She sees part of Trom from a bird's eye view, and then she sees Islington Cathedral. The 5 statues that represent the omens are now human, interesting, except there's a 6th figure at the mouth of the cathedral with no object in its hands. She begins to see faces in the spring waters. She sees the diviners, their faces, legs, and torsos grew contorted, bent into grotesque shapes. They're crying in agony. She tells the vision to stop, then feels a new pain that she's never experienced before. And then she hears, swords and armor, came a voice, are nothing to stone. She lurches up with a gasp. The divination is done and Rory is gone. She runs out of the cathedral to the wall where the other diviners are sitting. They're watching the knights leave. They ask if Rory's dream was interesting, but she admits that she doesn't know because she couldn't read the signs. She tries to laugh it off as saying it was just like a waste of time. She secretly hopes that the dream with the moth means nothing and that things will go back to normal. But when she wakes the next day, something isn't right because 4 has vanished. Chapter 8. Gone. Sybil walks the entire compound acting like she's mending the wall, but really she's searching for signs of 4 and is confused as to like how she just magically disappeared. Obviously, she finds no signs whatsoever. Since 4 has disappeared, the abyss has assigned a gargoyle to each remaining diviner. Sybil asks the gargoyle, her sassy one, if he knows what happened to 4. The gargoyle unhelpfully asks how would he know what happened to her, and if he did, why would he tell? He's in a foul mood that doesn't improve, which is kind of odd. At sundown, the diviners are gathered in their cottage and they're kind of fighting, torn between assuming 4 bailed on them or wondering if something bad happened to her. They also feel the abyss isn't that concerned as she only sent out 1 gargoyle to search for 4. 3 insists together they could find her. Sybil says that if 4 isn't back by the next night, they'll go out and search for her as a group. But the next night, after they return to their cottage, they find the doors locked when they go to leave. The next morning, they find 2 is now gone. Sybil goes to the abyss and to express her concern that something bad has happened to 2 and 4. And this is how the abyss reacts. She smoothed my hair. Fear is not an outward-pointing compass, my girl. You should not let it guide your way. The omens, their signs, are the only true measure of what is to come. Gaslighting 101. Sybil admits the day 4 disappeared, she had a dream about a moth. She describes the dream in detail, and then the abyss is quiet for a moment. The moth, the 6th omen. It's a presage. Presage? It's a presage of death, isn't it? My heart was racing. I wished desperately that she would hold me. I worry, Abyss. I worry something horrible is happening. The Abyss asks who she provided this divination for. And then Sybil admits that it was for a knight and that no, he didn't pay. The Abyss is not pleased by that because, you know, you don't get to do that for free. Instead of addressing the dream, the Abyss tells Sybil that she's aware that she and the other girls snuck out to Coulson Fair. And she also points out that she notices that Sybil dreams like twice as much as the others. She says, you were at war with yourself, 6, always thinking yourself stronger than them, better than them, martyring yourself for them. You resent them, wishing yourself half as bold as them. If the diviners have run off without a goodbye, then all your love and resentment and martyrdom were for nothing. I can see why you rail against it, why you suppose their absence is part of a larger scheme. But it isn't. They left and will be replaced when new foundlings arrive. Now go. I think this is the Abyss's way of just gaslighting her and manipulating her into being kind of helpless. She doesn't hate the other girls. She says, I'd gone to the Abyss to unburden myself in search of comfort, of answers, and left with nothing but shame. Yep, I've definitely had this kind of stuff put on me as a kid, especially when I went to an adult that I trusted looking for comfort, advice, reassurance, and then got served a heaping platter of shame, guilt, and gaslighting. She goes and tells the other girls that the Abyss told her that 2 and 4 had run away. The others don't believe this in the slightest. They've been locked in the cottage all night. Like, how did 2 and 4 get out? They go to sleep, and the next morning 3 is gone. The next evening, Sybil sneaks off the property to go to Castle Luric, that's Benji's castle, to ask for help. 1 and 5 have agreed to stay behind and to stay awake until she returns. On her way to the castle, she fears the worst for the other 3 girls who've gone missing. I shook myself. Don't let your mind run wild. What pace should I let it run then? I screamed, and so did the bat-like gargoyle behind me. You idiot. I put a hand on my breast. You scared me. Don't shout at me, Bartholomew. So the gargoyle, like I said before, he's a sensitive soul and he is full out sobbing. He followed after her because he thought she had run off. She puts an arm around him and starts to console him, assures him that she was going to come back. She wasn't going to leave them. She's trying to figure out where the other diviners have disappeared to. They go to the castle, but they aren't allowed through the gate. Apparently the king and the knighthood are not even, they're on business elsewhere anyway. Sybil insists that there must be someone who can see them and the guard rushes off to see if he can find anybody. While they're waiting, a bunch of drunk men approach, recognizing Sybil as a diviner. One of them tries to grab her, but the gargoyle stops him before he can, breaking his arm. Sybil tells the gargoyle that this act of violence was unnecessary and ignoble. The gargoyle, he then marvels at how fragile human beings are. I barely put any effort in there and I broke this guy's arm. Oh, funny. After this interaction, the two hightail it back to Isling. When Sybil gets back to the college, she finds one asleep and 5 is gone. The next morning, Sybil and 1 find they're locked in their cottage. Sybil is pissed. So 1 goes over to their mirror and stares at her reflection and takes off her shroud. Sybil doesn't look to see 1's reflection. She chooses to keep her shroud on. And then she hears 1 gasp. Her gasp filled the room. So soft, quiet horror. What's happened to us? So clearly there's something wrong with their eyes. 1 doesn't tell Sybil what she saw. She silently just puts her shroud back on and Sybil doesn't even want to ask. As the day drags into the night, 1 reflects that she can't remember anything in her life except for the darkness of Isling. She tells Sybil not to forget her if she disappears. Sybil promises her that if she does, she will come and find her. 1 asks Sybil if she'll tell her a story. So Sybil tells her about everything they're going to do once their service is up and they get to leave the cathedral. So the girls have this little bit of a tradition that whenever they're stressed out or upset, they tell each other a story, a nice story to reframe their mind and help them find peace or comfort when they're struggling. They fall asleep, and when Sybil wakes up, she just knows she's alone. 1 has now disappeared. So it's now just Sybil. All the other girls are gone. She's kept locked inside the cottage all day. When a gargoyle comes to give her food later, she tries to escape, but it grabs her and roughly throws her down on the floor. Later on, she's about to take her shroud off to see whatever it was that alarmed 1, but then realizes the truth didn't save 1, and then she just busts the mirror instead. That night, a shadow moves across the window. The shadow belonged to an object. I couldn't make it out, only that it was small. A stone, perhaps? Then, gods, I was losing my mind, because the object began to fall. A moment later, as if the iron bars locking my windows were nothing but a suggestion, a man stepped into the room and caught it. Ooh, a magical object has made its appearance. Assuming this is a kidnapper, Sybil launches herself at him, knocking them both to the floor. She demands to know who he is. She's thinking to herself, this is the person who's kidnapping all of us. She hears a faint laugh and then is catapulted backward, her hands pinned above her head. Well, if it isn't my least favorite diviner. Daddy's home. Chapter 9, time to go, diviner. Sybil naturally assumes that Rory has been kidnapping the other diviners with his ability to appear out of thin air. Of course, he has zero clue what she's talking about. He's like, I literally just came here because Benji told me that you came to the castle the other night and needed help, and so he sent me here to come find you and see what was going on. So he has no clue that the other diviners have disappeared. He tells her, I don't know where they are, but you're welcome to search me for them if you'd like. So she knees him in the groin and he rolls off of her in agony. She tells him this isn't a joke, but he insists that he's there because Benji sent him. So then Sybil tells him that each of the diviners have been disappearing one by one and always at night. He asks if she's seen anything or anyone suspicious. She admits, besides him, no. Rory mutters to himself for a moment as if considering his options. Finally, he tells her to gather her things. She admits that she doesn't have any. You don't have anything. I gestured at my dirty dress. Just my clothes. He was muttering to himself again. Tell me you at least have something for your feet. Like what? Like what? Like shoes, you twit. Boots, slippers, clogs fashioned by your stupid chisel? Anything? So at the mention of her chisel, she remembers that her hammer and chisel are outside and she goes to get off the mattress to get them. Rory lurches forward, bracing my hips. What are you? Don't kick me. I'm trying to help you. He nodded at the floor, moonlight kissing over the thousands of shards of glass. Unless you'd rather rip your feet to tatters. So she nods begrudgingly and warns him that she's heavy. No one's as strong as you, is that it, diviner? Put you on your back at Colson Fair easy enough, didn't I? That got a smile out of him. A moment later, I was in the air, slung over his shoulder like a dead deer. I swore and he chuckled. Glass crunching beneath his boots as he moved through the room. Threw you on that bed easy enough too, he murmured. So Rory tries to bust down the door of the cottage. Sybil watches him struggle and she's a little amused. Rory uses a tool to get them through the door but refuses to tell her what it is. They go to the tool shed so Sybil can get her chisel and hammer, but she struggles to get the door open and Rory is now amused. The bat-like gargoyle sneaks up on them and Rory flings a knife at his head. Did he just try to smite me, Bartholomew? Rory's gaze jerked. Bartholomew? That's your name? Piff, you're thick. No, he calls everyone Bartholomew. What the hell for? Nobody knows why he calls everybody Bartholomew at this point. The gargoyle offers to break Rory's neck to protect Sybil, and then Rory tells him that he's there trying to help her escape. He's not the enemy. Sybil asks the gargoyle for the keys to the tool shed and tells him she's leaving, which causes him to start weeping, because remember, the gargoyle is very sensitive. The sound alerts the abbess, who shows up and goes into this big old monologue about how Sybil is useless in the real world and is better to stay with her. Very, again, mother knows best. Sybil refuses, and the abbess orders her other gargoyles to kill Rory as she retreats to the cathedral. And then Rory asks her, which one, diviner? Rory's voice was deathly calm. He looked over his shoulder at me. Which one marked up your face? Ooh. Rachel does this thing where she'll take a common trope like the "who did this to you?" and she'll tweak the dialogue just enough to not make it so eye-rolly, cringy, you know what I mean? So she tells him the culprit, and he uses his tool again and causes the gargoyle to literally explode. Sybil is stunned until Rory reminds her, like, hey, you need to like go grab your hammer and chisel. I'll hold these guys off. So the gargoyle opens the shed door and begs Sybil to let him come with them. He doesn't want to be a part of the story anymore. She agrees mainly to keep him from crying. Sybil is attacked by another gargoyle, but Rory destroys it with this coin. He throws it and it causes the objects to like explode. So another gargoyle goes to attack Rory and he bends down to collect his coin. Sybil shoves Rory down by his hair just before the gargoyle strikes and destroys it with her hammer. Smash it with a hammer! I looked down at Rory. He was on his knees in front of me, breathing hard. I let go of his hair instantly. The corners of his mouth curled. His fathomless eyes held me a second, and then he was standing to his full height, offering me his hand. He's kind of into that, and so is she. The two take off with the bat-like gargoyle following. More gargoyles start coming out of the stonework, if you will. Don't hate me. Rory tosses this coin through the wall and they disappear through the stone and then rematerialize after Rory catches the coin again. So they've managed to outrun the other gargoyles, with the bat-like one is following them. Rory's not thrilled about the gargoyle joining them, but he seems to understand he doesn't have a say in the matter. And you would be correct, Rory, you don't. Sybil catches Rory fidgeting with the stone with one smooth and one rough side. She recognizes it as the coin she sees all the time, but only in her dreams. Rory tells her that he will take her to the king and they will see if they can figure out where the other diviners have gone. Why does Rory have the coin from her dreams? Interesting. Then we go ahead into the next part of the book. This is called the Siege. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Chapter 10, Young and Rather Old. They ride off on Rory's horse and Sybil is really just mind blown because she realizes obviously the coin that Rory has is the Artful Brigand's coin. How the heck does he have that? Because it's an omen. She didn't realize it was something that was actually fully corporeal. So she wonders if the Artful Brigand can live on the other side of dreams too. And then she suddenly has a sinking fear that Rory, the foulest knight in Trom, is an omen and almost falls off the horse. She debates whether or not she should bring this up to Rory right now, but decides to keep it to herself for the time being as she tries to unravel and figure out this mystery. They ride into the city just as dawn breaks, and people immediately begin to recognize Sybil as a diviner. Rory tells her she needs a better disguise and to lose the shroud. She tells him no. Why not? No is a sufficient answer. Great quote. Plaster that everywhere. Rory asks what's behind the shroud, and she admits that she doesn't know. The gargoyles always supplied them with clean shrouds whenever they had to remove them to wash their faces, so they were disciplined to keep their eyes shut. So again, like, nobody knows. Rory relents, understanding that she doesn't know the answer, and he leaves the topic alone. They walk through the city and Sybil has a total country bumpkin sees New York City for the first time moment. They come across an orphanage and she thinks this must be where the other diviners were chosen from. Someone then stomps on her bare foot and tells her to watch where she's going. When he notices her shroud, he calls her a bitch and tells her to get away from him, which she's like alarmed by. She's like, okay, I don't understand why I deserve that. The gargoyle shoves the man and Rory slaps him across the face and tells him to watch his mouth. Someone notices Sybil, and within seconds, a crowd begins to form around them. People are like begging her to give them a word and a blessing. Rory then gracefully directs her out and away from this throng of people. Two hooded figures catch Rory's eye and he sneaks up on them and tries to pickpocket them. It turns out these hooded figures are Benji and Maud, who are on their way to visit some mysterious person. Maud isn't thrilled Sybil is joining them, but she insists on coming along. Rory explains this person may know where the other diviners have gone. Rory orders the gargoyle to stay with Fig, that's the horse. When his bottom lip begins to quiver, he tells him that Fig gets lonely, so she needs company. And then he's like given us with the sense of purpose, he's like, I definitely do that. I could definitely keep this horse company. Rory warns her that this business may get animated. They're challenging a man at his craft. He asks her if she knows what that means. She kind of does, because she basically did that to Rory back in Coulson Fair, but she doesn't quite understand what it means in this context. So as they head into this building, this like secluded kind of hidden building, Sybil notes they're all tense. So she asks Rory why he's nervous, but she refers to him by his last name. He reminds her to call him Rory, but Sybil retorts that she doesn't want to encourage any familiarity between the two of them because he's incredibly difficult to like. You'd like me better if you called me Rory. I'd like you better if you were on your back again. He smiled, and unfamiliar heat burrowed into my face. From throwing you and your inferior strength down. Obviously. Yep, sweetheart, you walked right into that one. They enter this room with no windows, and in the center is a man with eyes made of stone. In his hand was the inkwell from my dreams. He stared at me, drawing in a long, rasping breath. A daughter of Aisling. He lifted a hand, beckoning me. Come in. Chapter 11, The Harried Scribe. So this is a moment where Sybil starts to have an unraveling of her reality. She's like, oh my gosh, I think my entire religion and lifestyle is a lie. So Benji tells the harried scribe that they're there to challenge him at his craft and to take his inkwell. Sybil can't believe that anyone can just take these sacred relics. The scribe's inkwell can be thrown and turn the wielder invisible. The scribe uses it to put Sybil up on some shelf like 50 feet above the ground to keep her out of harm's way. Basically what happens in this scenario is to be the scribe, you have to like be able to answer riddles correctly and vice versa. I guess the scribe asks questions, or no, you ask the scribe questions and the scribe asks you questions, but basically they end up beating the scribe. He had claimed that he knows everything, and so Sybil asks him, well, if you know everything, what happened to all my fellow sisters, the other diviners? He just doesn't give her an answer. So because the scribe loses, he's a sore loser, a big fight breaks out. So Sybil tries to climb down from these shelves that the scribe put her up on, but the scribe ends up slapping her in the face and she falls, spilling her blood on the floor. Her blood sends the scribe into this like crazy frenzy. He says that he can smell it and it's in your blood, Aisling's water. So he can actually smell the water in her blood. Rory yanks the scribe off of her and uses the coin to shatter the scribe, who, as he explodes, it's clear that he's made of flesh, blood, and stone, much to Sybil's horror. Sybil runs away from the scene because she's starting to realize that her entire religion is potentially false because these objects that she thought were only in her dreams are turning out to be real magical artifacts in this world she lives in. Sybil runs off. Rory catches up with her. She accuses him of being an omen. He corrects her and says that this coin used to belong to the artful brigand, but he lost it when he was challenged to his craft. He tells her he's not a god, but he's the one destroying them. So chapter 12, our feet will take us wherever we need to go. Overwhelmed by these abrupt, devastating revelations, Sybil and the gargoyle run off into the city, away from Maud and Benji and Rory. Whenever they finally stop, Sybil asks the gargoyle what he knows about the omens, and she realizes she's never bothered to ask him before, and he says, because you believed yourself better than me. That's not... I looked over my shoulder at him. Maybe I thought there was a hierarchy to Aisling, like I thought there was to all of Trom. Sybil can be quite pious, but I think she's starting to realize how prideful and arrogant she's actually been this whole time when she actually doesn't know anything. Now she doesn't know what she's supposed to believe. The omens' creeds are about truth. I always assumed them virtuous, eternal, immortal. I looked over at the canal, but it seems like they are none of those things. So the gargoyle recognizes that Sybil is rightfully overwhelmed and exhausted and hungry, and he insists that they attend to those human issues first before carrying on. Quite wise. After she's rested and eaten some of the food the gargoyle stole, which I think is funny, a funny note that he stole food, they keep a low profile and trudge through the city streets. Sybil is now seeing for the first time what poverty looks like for the average human being living in the city. They stop at an orphanage, and Sybil asks the woman who runs the orphanage if she's familiar with any of the diviners or if she's seen any diviners. And turns out no diviners have returned to this orphanage, but Sybil learns that the abbess is a patron. There are 3 other orphanages, but she's not likely to find any diviners there either. The other hamlets send their orphans here, but mainly the girls, especially the poor sick ones. Gives them a good shot to end up at Aisling as diviners. All of the diviners are orphan kids that are taken from these orphanages. So after visiting all of the orphanages and realizing that none of the diviners have stopped by or been seen. She goes and sits down and she's reflecting on all of this. She asks the gargoyle if he knows why the abbess chooses only girls to come to Isling. And he says, all I know is that they're always girls and often sick. Why? She said that girls bear the pain of drowning better and that sick ones always wake strange, special, and new. So at this time, a couple of young girls walk past Sybil and the gargoyle and are closely followed by grown adult men with their eyes fixed on the girls. Sybil immediately knows their intent and a bit of a brawl breaks out. Sybil gets kind of beat up, but she's got her hammer and her chisel. Her and the gargoyle, because the gargoyle is like super strong, they fight back and really beat the tar out of these dudes. The guys, being the pansies that they are calling out for help, and that rouses the curiosity of some nearby guards. These guards show up and they arrest Sybil and the gargoyle, saying that there's a warrant out for your arrest. The king's looking for you guys. So they take those two to the castle, where they are handed over to Rory. Rory is fixated at a cut on Sybil's lip and asks her if she's hurt anywhere else, and she says that she's fine. And the gargoyle is like, I too am unharmed. The gargoyle patted his stone chest. Right as raindrops. So close. I do love this theme that the gargoyle does not know how to use common expressions. He always gets something like kind of almost right, or it's like the opposite, and it's pretty comical. So the gargoyle dismisses himself to go sleep in the stables, giving Rory and Sybil a chance to talk. Rory admits that he, Benji, and Maud didn't really mildly expose her to the complexity of the omens, so he kind of is giving her a bit of apology, like, I understand why you ran off because that was probably a lot for you to take in. And Sybil says that she's been able to read Rory's disdain for Isling and her since they met. She should have noticed the signs that her religion was also a farce due to like just the sheer animosity that Rory had towards it. And he says, I have disdain in me, yes. Rory's brows drew together, lips parted slightly enough for me to hear the shaky sound of his exhale, but none for you. Our gaze is held, the effect sharper than the cracking of whips. Ooh, we got some tension building here. Maud interrupts them and seeks to remedy the continued lack of Sybil's shoes. That girl's been walking around in the city with no shoes. Gross. Like, yeah, put some shoes on this girl. Chapter 13, Take Up the Mantle. Sybil goes to meet with Benji. He comes off as very like insecure young boy-esque, and he insists that she call him Benji, which makes her uncomfortable because she's like, you are a king though, so it feels a little weird for me to just very casually refer to you as that. But he insists on that. They sit down and talk. He tells her what his mission is. His grandfather had written in great detail about Trom's great beginning and thoroughly researched the history of Isling Cathedral. His beliefs in Trom's origin resulted in him being stoned for heresy. Okay, approximately 230 years ago, before Isling was built, 5 craftsmen came to a tour. A thieving merchant, dubbed a brigand, a scribe, an oarsman, a forester, and a weaver. Trom was in discord. The hamlets had no gods, no ruler, and were overcome by sprites. The craftsmen came to the tour in an attempt to unify, to decide who among them should lead. Then a 6th person came into the picture, the abbess, and she had with her an orphan child. The abbess took the craftsmen to the spring. They drank from it, and she gifted them these magical artifacts. Now they no longer needed to choose a leader because they all had power. So they each retreated to their respective hamlets and used their magic to obliterate sprites. So there is no living in communion together. Benji insists that the craftsmen weren't gods but were mortals changed by the spring waters that they drank, which mostly goes against what the abbess preached. What we're arguing here is that the omens aren't even gods, they're just mortals that have power. Benji's grandfather's obsession with the history of Isling led him on a pilgrimage to see if the omens walked among them. Benji's grandfather found Rory as an orphan child. Rory's master at the time was the artful brigand. He gave Rory the coin, and Rory would steal a number of things, especially water, from Isling Cathedral. He told Rory as plain as day that while Trom did indeed benefit from faith, it was the omens who truly reaped the rewards, that as long as they had Isling's water to drink, they would live forever, doing whatever they liked, that the abbess paid them to walk the shadows of their hamlets, cloaked and mysterious, like merciful gods might. So we learn that the abbess pays the omens. Interesting. They learn this because his grandfather tracked a shipment of gold from Isling to the Chiming Wood. The recipient was the faithful forester. He demanded answers from her, but she refused to tell him anything unless he defeated her at her craft. And this again is Benji's grandfather who's discovering all of this. Maud was a member of Benji's grandfather's knighthood. She killed the faithful forester, but they never found the magical artifact, and to this day it remains missing. So now his grandfather was determined to unravel the conspiracy of Isling Cathedral to kill all the omens. The hamlets didn't like the king profaning the omens, because remember, they all believed in it. The king's knighthood turned against him. He was taken to the Isling Cathedral, forced to endure a divination. 5 bad portents were divined for him, He was stoned in the courtyard by the knights and the gargoyles. So his grandfather was Maud's mentor and Rory's deliverer. So their hatred for the omens runs deep, because for Maud, he was a mentor to Maud, and then for Rory, like, he pulled Rory out and away from being a thief for not a good master. What we also find out too is that Benji's grandfather let Rory become a knight, and that's kind of a big deal because the knighthood is made up of like other nobility, and Rory had no nobility because he was an orphan, but Benji's grandfather allowed him to become a knight. Rory has a lot of loyalty towards Benji's grandfather, who is passed on, obviously, and also kind of views Benji as a brother and is very loyal to him as well. Benji tells her that the spring, the rotten spring water, is what these omens want. When they went to the Island Cathedral a couple weeks ago for him to have a divination done, it wasn't to get a divination, it was so they could go and steal water from the spring, because they realized since the other omens that are mortals, essentially, they can be lured out of hiding with the spring water. So Benji's intent is to use the spring water as a lure to pull the omens out of where they're hiding so they can defeat them at their craft and acquire all the magical artifacts. Sybil just wants to find her diviners and figure out what happened. Rory wants to collect these objects because to him, he can rebalance the wealth in society, because we found out obviously the Abbess pays these omens like tons of money to keep up with this fake facade. So he wants to redistribute the wealth throughout the kingdom to help those who actually need the money and to give people like a real deity of some sort to look up to, or at least like a figurehead to look up to, instead of being misled by this false religion. Benji wants Sybil to come with them because having a diviner with them in and of itself would look like a good omen to the other hamlets that they're going into, so it would help people feel more at ease. That way they can hopefully acquire all of the magical artifacts and hopefully figure out where the diviners are. Sybil asks him like, okay, well, if we do this, then what happens to Isling Cathedral? And he says that he'll shutter it. There will be no more diviners, no more dreams, no more signs. She agrees. She's like, okay, I will travel with you and help you guys find the omens and hopefully find the diviners as well. So after their meeting ends, Sybil wanders off and she finds herself in the training yard where the knights are sparring. She immediately recognizes Rory's figure, even though he's fully covered in armor. She watches with rapt focus as he defeats another knight. And then he saw me. He went still, mouth half open. There was blood on his bottom lip, some near his left brow as well. The charcoal around his eyes was smeared, staining his sweat black. I'd never seen a knight so filthy, so physically degraded by his craft. He looked entirely ignoble. Hamlin, again, like an ill-timed sneeze, makes his appearance and he pulls her out of her thoughts towards Rory. He's like, hey, Sybil, you know what? I apologize for my egregious behavior before I, was a total brute. Sybil just kind of like brushes him off, and her lack of interest and only encourages him to try and turn on the charm, because he's handsome, so who could resist him? He tells her he'd do things differently if she gave him another chance. Rory interrupts and tells Hamlin that he's next up to spar. Hamlin says, I'm talking? Not anymore. Put your helmet on. Hamlet's smile waned. Hamlin does not like Rory. And again, this is another detail that's showing like this building tension. So then Rory asks her like, okay, so are you joining our little search party? She says yes, but the main thing for her is she wants to find the diviners. She's still not so sure about everything else that Benji is trying to accomplish, which fair, because like she's just learning all this information about that her religion is possibly like a complete farce and that her role in society was like, again, a complete farce. So he tells her to follow him. You'll need better clothes, fortifications, better everything. It could have been blood, or maybe just maybe I caught the hint of a flush in his cheeks. I'm fitting you for armor. Oh boy, here we go. Chapter 14, wax. It's just called wax. This is the beeswax scene. If you know, you know. So Rory gathers all these supplies up to form the mold for the armor. And he plainly asks her what Hamlin wanted while he was chit-chatting with her there. She tells him to just reminisce that it was nothing special. And she's also like, oh, by the way, Rory, I didn't sleep with Hamlin. Like, there's nothing going on between us. Sybil admits that Rory's words about her being bereft of fun she took to heart. So she arranged for their trip to the Coulson Fair with every intention of sleeping with Hamlin just to prove Rory wrong. Rory admits that he was trying to get under her skin by saying those things because she seemed so pious and patronizing. He wanted to bring her down to his level to prove she's no better than him. He regretted his decision and apologizes for his unkind behavior towards her. Wow, an actual admission of fault. An apology from an ignoble knight? So Rory heats up this beeswax. He's going to use it to create a mold. I don't really know, historically speaking, if this is how armor was made. I'd have to look it up. But it is an interesting premise because it actually would probably work for making a mold. So she says, I look down at my billowing dress. I hate to break it to you, but this is hardly the shape of my body. I'm acutely aware of that. Thank you. Before he starts to make the mold though, he asks if he can clean up her lip because her lip is still bleeding from the fight that she got in with the harried scribe, which I was like, I didn't realize her lip was still bleeding or bloody or whatever from that, but I guess it is. Once again, he waits for her to give enthusiastic consent before touching her. Must I spell it out? I permit you. Rory rolled his eyes. You don't like it when I'm a bad night, he muttered, and you don't like it when I'm a good one. Have you considered that's because I don't like you at all? There it was again. The stain of a flush upon his olive cheeks. Yeah, I've considered that. Before he puts the beeswax on her to start creating the mold, he actually goes around and sews all of her gown so it fits and it's like tightly fitted to her body. And we get a little bit of almost like a therapy session, if you will. He asks her about the men that she got into a fight with, what they were doing. And she tells him like, well, they were stalking girls and that didn't sit right with her. He's like, so that made you angry? Shouldn't it? Of course. Each word held an edge. I think children are particularly vulnerable in trauma. Sybil picks up on this double meaning in his words because he's referring to Aisling and to the diviners, referring to her as a vulnerable child that was like taken against her will. Rory says he's just making it know that the abbess takes foundlings to do her bidding. Maybe foundlings are less likely to question that which is taught to them in kindness, I murmured. And the abbess was kind to me. She took care of me, told me that I was special, that dreaming was divine. As to why she chooses girls, I learned it's about pain, how girls bear it best, which rather contradicts what I just said about her being kind, doesn't it? She feels kind of dumb for the fact that she fell for the abbess's love, even though this love that she received from her was all conditional and it was based on her performance. And then Rory tells her, her care came with conditions. You bent yourself to fit them, and now you see yourself as this terrible burden, like you're nothing if you're not the best, the most useful version of yourself. It's not true, he said. You don't have to be good or useful for someone to care about you. He's an ignoble, dirty knight. And then he says things like this. Sybil is unsettled by Rory's assessment of her due to the fact that like the truth his words revealed, and she's like she's feeling vulnerable about that. And then she's also feeling vulnerable because of like how tightly he's sewing this gown to her, and her like now she's like fully encased in this sleeve of a dress, and she's like, I feel vulnerable in all areas. As he's tailoring her dress, he grips her forearm, and it says, large as his hand was, it didn't fit around my bicep. He made the smallest hum of appreciation.
I love the kind of woman that will actually just kill me.
He's like into it. Like he likes the fact that she's built. So then Rory gets that hot beeswax ready. Now he starts to build the mold. So he gets her all like coated up except for her abdomen, sternum, breast, ribs, and stomach. Every vital thing that needs to be behind a breastplate is not molded yet. The red returned to his cheeks. You're nervous, I said, grinning. Why is that? Don't flatter yourself. But you're blushing. Dying to fidget with that stolen coin in your pocket, maybe? Touching a diviner must make your heretical heart truly uneasy. So Rory gets up in her face, tells her that he thinks she gets enjoyment out of teasing him and grinding her heel into his pride. I'd bet my oath your whole body is awake right now, aching and eager at the thought of putting me in my place. Much like the beeswax, I too am melting. Sybil cannot process anything at the moment. She's like, you want to throw me down? Rory said, eyelids dropping as he whispered into my parted lips. And I, prideful, disdainful, godless, want to drag you into the dirt with me. So he pulls back away from her and tells her that Maud will come in and finish making the breastplate mold, and then he walks out. I just picture Sybil sitting there like she's encased in beeswax that's hardening, and she's just standing there. So now she's like completely flustered about this flirtatious sexual attention she's got going on. She's just standing there like a scarecrow. So we're into the next part called The Fervent Peaks. This is chapter 15, Mountain Sprites. They're on their way to the Fervent Peaks, so when they arrive at the next hamlet, the noble families will put on this ceremony to welcome the king. Since no one has a clue where the next omen is, Sybil suggests that she and Rory should be the ones to search for the ardent oarsman during the ceremony while everyone else is preoccupied. She tells Maud this, and Maud agrees. Yeah, you know what, that sounds like a solid plan. Rory's eyes flickered to my face. We hadn't spoken since he'd measured me for armor. If you wanted to get me alone, diviner, all you had to do was ask. He's teasing, but we all know he's dead serious. And as they're traveling, we get a little bit of conversation between Maud and Sybil. Maud ends up telling her again that Benji's grandfather was her mentor. When stuff started to escalate with his searching of the omens, he made her promise to basically be the first person to turn against him in the knighthood, so that way nobody would suspect her of loyalty to him, so that he was basically saving her from being outed as a heretic. She ended up being the first person to throw a stone at him after his divination at the cathedral. Benji's parents died. She's loyal to him and basically his mother. Her goal is to keep Benji safe and to keep him on the throne because that's basically what she promised his grandfather. Anywho, they're traveling up these hills. They get intercepted by a mountain sprite that's kind of made out of rocks. And so a big fight ensues. Benji ends up falling off of his horse. We kind of learn that Benji is actually not that great at being a knight. He doesn't really know combat skills, and so he's kind of useless in that way. He falls off his horse. Sybil sees this happen, so she and the gargoyle rush off to go help Benji. His leg is like stuck inside a stone, like his armor is snagged up on a stone, really weird. And you got these like giant mountain sprites who are made of rocks who are like fighting around him, and rocks are flying everywhere and you're trying not to get crushed to death. Sybil uses her hammer and she smashes the rock that Benji is snagged on, and then the gargoyle grabs them both and flies them off into an area where they're safe. This is where we learned that the mountain sprites actually eat shale, but the people who live there don't let them eat, so they're like starving. Some of my beef with the story is that the relationships between the sprites and the humans is not well fleshed out, and I kind of wish we would have gotten a little bit more explanation and history for that. Did they not have a good relationship with the sprites because the sprites would like strip the land of its resources, or is the fact that the people are greedy and refuse to let the sprite have their fair share of the resources that they needed? That's where the world building fell a little flat to me. Like, we hear about sprites and it seems like they should be a large part of the book, but then it doesn't really come off that way. I wish that was kind of elaborated on just a little bit more. Sybil and the gargoyle save Benji. Rory runs up to them and he's like so relieved that Benji is unharmed. Maud tells Sybil and the gargoyle that they did a good job. Chapter 16, what is harrowing is hollowed. So they finally arrive at the village. Sybil's appearance raises some eyebrows because rumor has it that Benji's divination garnered the ill portent. He's kind of walking in the footsteps of his grandfather, is like just not a very well-renowned guy. And so seeing Sybil there is kind of like, ooh, interesting. Rory asks the village leaders if they've seen any other diviners as of late, and they say no. And they're like, well, should we expect to see more diviners? And Rory says, unlikely. Rory's gaze flickered to my face. She's a guest of the king's. Affront her in any way, the knighthood will answer. Attempt to look beneath her shroud. She and the gargoyle will respond as they see fit. Full immunity to any carnage tended. The gargoyle batted his eyes. Oh, Bartholomew, he's dreamy. I really just like how Rory is so quick to be like, don't touch her. It's that touch her and die quote, but it's not worded like that. Yes, he's protective of her, but also at the same time, he's like, hey, she's perfectly capable of holding her own. Ceremony starts. Rory slips away with Sybil. They take the water that they stole from Aisling, or that Rory actually stole, and they use it to lure out, hopefully, the elusive ardent oarsman. So while they're waiting, there's this, odd tension between them. Sybil asked Rory if he's ever been married, and because apparently Four fiddled around with a married knight that didn't tell her that he was married until like after the fact, and so just to be safe, Sybil's like, you're not actually in a relationship with anybody, right? Rory's like, no, I'm not married. And she's like, okay, well, there's nobody in the knighthood that you like? And he's like, no, because we don't really allow relations in the knighthood. And then he asks her in turn if there's anybody that she fancies, and she admits that there's a few people that she's slept with, but no one that's stuck. And Rory asks her why not, and she says, same as your knighthood. Aisling bars bedfellows. Any flirtation I had was over before it started, and knowing that nothing would last, I could never what? Nothing. He didn't let it go. Never. I could never get comfortable, never feel what you're meant to feel, losing oneself with someone else, the unraveling. He was silent for a beat of my heart, then two. You've never finished. So she expects him to laugh at her. You think there's something wrong with me? I don't. Rory's voice was gravel. I was wondering what it would be like watching you unravel. Woo, sir. At first when I read this, I was like, okay, that's kind of hot for him to say something like that. And then I was like, but also it's kind of unrealistic, but truthfully, kind of refreshing at the same time to have someone be that honest with you. So many people don't want to admit their feelings for each other, which I think is ridiculous. Like, if you like someone, you like someone, just be honest about it. This is a very intimate conversation. It's interrupted by moving shadows. And then this cloaked figure comes out of the dark, and they watch it as it drinks from a flask. Sybil realizes this is no god, but a mortal. It's the ardent oarsman. Chapter 17, the ardent oarsman. They follow after the oarsman after he drinks the water from the flask, and he uses his oar to travel up this waterfall. So they're like, crap, now we have to get to him up this massive waterfall. So Rory has an idea. He uses his coin, disappears, and he comes back with the gargoyle, who is claiming that Rory kidnapped him. They use the gargoyle to fly them up the waterfall to where the ardent oarsman disappeared. They go to fly off. Rory puts his arm around her waist, and she tells him to hold her tighter. And he tells her, I'm not going to drop stop you. They get to the top, the gargoyle puts him down, and Rory does not immediately let her go. His gaze collided with mine. He let go of my waist and I his shoulders. I heard the shaky sound of his exhale, and then we both looked away. Fast. There's this castle at the top of this waterfall. It's guarded by sprites. So they quietly walk up these stone steps and don't wake up the sprites. They meet the ardent oarsman, who has a face similar to the mountain sprites, gray and smooth and rough. His eyes are limestone and his teeth are made of like sharpened stone. Rory tells him they're there on the king's behalf to take up the mantle. The oarsman doesn't pay him any mind. He snatches Sybil away from Rory, telling Rory to keep his coin to himself unless, he wants Sybil to be axed. The oarsman says that he can smell Aisling's water on her and wonders how much of the water she's consumed in her time as a diviner. He then bites her neck and tries to remove her shroud. Sybil slams her chisel into his leg and uses the distraction to flee back to Rory and the gargoyle. Rory takes her hand, which I think it's so cute, even though this is kind of a horrifying moment. Sybil demands to know where the other diviners are because she's suspicious that this guy actually knows. He tells her that if she stays there with him, he'll tell her everything she needs to know. Rory's grip tightens around her hand, but he doesn't speak for her. He lets her give her own answer. She says to him, "You're not a dream. You're just a man paid like a king to play act as a god. A facade, hoarding wealth yet claiming to starve. You have no love for Trom, its Stonewater kingdom, nor for the people who call you hallowed. Your glory may come from Aisling, but it was earned by the dreaming and drowning of diviners like me. I'm not afraid of you, because without me, you would be nothing. Go off, girl." So the gargoyle lets out this raucous hoot, and Rory, there was a world behind his dark eyes. It was as if he could see everything all at once when he looked at me, and it was far too much, but he wanted all of it. So if he wasn't smitten with her before, he is now, because he's into strong women who can stand up for themselves.
I really hope some hot chick paints my brains all over some hallway.
So the oarsman laughs at her and tells her that the diviners are lost and she will never find them, and he refuses to reveal their fate. Rory retorts you will tell us where the diviners are because I'm challenging you at your craft. And when we win, you're going to tell me. Oarsman tells him to challenge him at his craft means a fight to the death. Rory says, "Okay, give me 3 days to prepare." The oarsman surprisingly agrees to this. However, he tells Rory that he doesn't want to fight Rory. He wants to fight Sybil. And so she has to be the one that faces him. Chapter 18 is called Hit Me as Hard as You Can Encore. So the next morning, Sybil manages to get into her more constrictive training clothes, including the leather boots. So she's not accustomed to wearing tight-fitted clothing because she's used to her flowy gown, so this is quite an exercise for her in and of itself. That day, Rory ends up running her through the workout of her life. His gaze flashed over my body, the shape of me held close in leather. He too was in leather, bereft of armor. When his eyes fell to my feet, my boots, he pressed his teeth into his bottom lip. "The diviner wearing boots. My faith is restored. Explains why you're drooling," Maud grinned as she passed us. I just really like Maud being gleeful and how Rory doesn't even deny it. He's yeah, I'm checking her out, and I'm not gonna sit here and be a child that's well, I don't like her like that. Rory starts her off with drills. She runs stairs or something like that. So she's running these drills, and Rory is scowling at her lumberous gait is what he calls it. I pulled myself upright, reached for his cheek, dragged the corner of his mouth with my thumb until he wore an absurd half smile. "That's better. Still foul and unknightly though. Just the way you like me." Rory nipped the pad of her thumb. "Now run it again." Again, in some respects, I think their romance developed a little bit fast, but I have to argue against that because sometimes these kinds of relationships do just develop fast. Me and my husband, we fell for each other pretty darn quickly, so I think it still works. Sparring is the next challenge on the list. First things first, Rory bit the finger of his glove and peeled it off. How well can you actually see through that shroud? I can see just fine. He threw his glove, it smacked me on the nose and plopped to the stones on my feet. A vision issue, Rory pondered, or just slow reflexes? Rory argues that this shroud could hinder her vision during the fight, but Sybil refuses to remove it. Using the brigand's coin, they begin to spar, so Rory's fast reflexes make this kind of a monkey in the middle type thing. So as they're going back and forth, she's getting really pissed. Finally, she moves fast enough where she tackles Rory to the ground, knocks him off his feet, slams his wrist down, puts her hand around his throat. He shows her that up close is better by using his hips to shove her further forward onto him so her forearm is resting against his throat. This close proximity causes things to harden, if you catch my drift. And they almost kiss until they're interrupted by Benji, Maud, and the gargoyle. "You two still sparring?" someone called over the rain. "Or have we shifted tactics?" The gargoyle was there too. "I say, Bartholomew," he said distractedly. "Are you quite well?" I peeled myself off Rory faster than I'd run my warm-ups. "I'm fine. I meant that Bartholomew." The gargoyle flicked a stone finger at Rory. "That knave looks undone."
I love the kind of woman that will actually just kill me.
Sometimes I find these scenes kind of cringy, but I found that one kind of fun. Maud is not super happy because trying to train Sybil to have combat skills in 3 days is completely unrealistic, which it is, because Sybil has no combat training skills. The girl's been drowning her whole life as her job. Maud's just expressing her concerns. She doesn't want her to die before she's had a chance to actually live, which I think that's really sweet. But Rory believes without a doubt that Sybil can beat the oarsmen. So for the next 2 days, Sybil trains extremely hard, but you know, you can only accomplish so much in a couple days. The night before the battle, Sybil understandably cannot sleep. There comes a soft knock on her door. She goes to the door and it's Rory on the other side, and he's amped up. He tells her there's somewhere they can go that will help with the restlessness they both feel.
What do you mean by that?
Chapter 19, I can't swim.
I can't swim.
Rory takes her to this hot spring so they can soak and relieve their sore muscles. She admits to him that she can't swim. It's a grim reminder that of course she wouldn't know how to swim because she was trained to drown. He tells her not to worry about drowning, especially in the spring because it's not that deep. He disrobes completely and jumps in. Sybil hesitates. His eyes flittered over my nightshirt. If it's about protecting my innocence, you're too late. You were practically naked in that wet divining robe the night we met. How mortifying for you. He slapped a hand over his eyes and turned around, offering me privacy and another view of his sculpted back. Never said that. Stop being cute and flirty. Sybil makes a comment to herself. I was losing my faith in everything, but the two of us meeting, it almost felt divine. So he like massages her wrists and her forearms and stuff, trying to help her muscles loosen up. Of course, he always asks for permission before he touches her at any point. He asks her how her feet feel because it can't be easy wearing those nice boots all day. And she tells him, you touch my feet, you die. Taking this as a challenge, he goes to reach underwater for her foot. She kicks out at him, splashing him. He grabs her ankle, causing her to fall back and underwater. And suddenly it was not a hot spring I was falling into, but the spring at Isling Cathedral. A hand found the back of my neck. I was thrust out of the water. I've got you. Breathe, diviner. I didn't think. He pushed my hair out of my face, careful of my shroud, kept his hand at the nape of my neck as my feet found the rocks at the bottom of the pool. I'm discourteous and utterly poisoned by contempt. I know that. His throat hitched. But letting you fall underwater when all you ever did at Isling was drown. When Rory glanced down, I saw misery in his eyes. I'm sorry, he mouthed. And just like that, another crack fissured in my heart. The scene starts out like super cute and flirty, and then it turns really sober really fast. He's thinking like, they'll just be like flirting and having fun, and it's turned into complete horror. And then he's so horrified at himself for what he's just done. And then his like profusely apologizing for his mistake. I think, again, this is the reason why I like Rachel Gillig's men, like the way that she writes them. I think they're a really good example of like an actual positive masculinity. It makes me like swoon reading these scenes. Sybil can tell, obviously, that he's so mortified. So she's like, I don't want to end the night on a bad note. So she's like, you know what, Rory, it's really fine. Like, I understand it was a mistake. And she's like, I mean, I don't want to leave just yet. I'm still really sore. Could you like massage my one shoulder? And that leads to this other bit. So we went from flirty to horror back to flirting. He tells her as he's massaging her shoulder, your hair is pretty, Rory murmured, like moonlight, and your skin is so soft. But beneath, he kneaded my muscle. If I were to bite down, I'd break my teeth on you. If you were to bite down, I said to the sky, your bottom teeth would leave a crooked mark, unique as your fingerprint. Rory's hand stilled. A flush rolled onto my face. That's what I thought when we first spoke at Isling, I muttered. He looked half amused, half something else. And you were imagining what pattern my teeth might leave on your skin? I was in the throes of idle weed, out of my senses. He resumed his ministrations. Shall we see then? Where would you bite me, knight? Wherever you told me to, diviner. And then she's like, my arms, my neck, my mouth, my stomach, She didn't say that out loud, but like, come on. So instead of biting all those areas, he bites her thumb and then kisses her palm with arduous slowness. I'd rather this left a mark instead, he murmured into my skin. Ooh. In a moment of sobriety and reality as to what's going to happen, Sybil asked Rory if things don't go well during this fight, if he will find a home for the gargoyle and if he'll continue to search for the diviners. Yes, he drew closer. The thing is, I think I'd do anything you asked of me. They call it quits there. So things don't escalate any further. Sybil returns to the inn, and instead of dreaming about Isling that night, she dreams about Rory instead. So the next morning, the gargoyle cheerfully announces Maud suggested he act as Sybil's squire, which he enthusiastically agrees to. Maud offers Sybil her armor because at this point, even though it won't fit her perfectly, anything is better than nothing. So they meet up with Rory and Benji. Rory hands her the coin. All right, it's time to go kill an omen. So I forgot to mention, but yeah, when they were training, they realized while sparring and training that they were like, Rory was like, if we give her a chance to train with the Artful Brigand coin, she can use that during the fight, and that should give her the edge that she needs to take down this omen. Instead of being in the castle, the oarsman is waiting for her in the actual river that runs right next to the castle. Maud turns to her and says, "I hope you're a damn strong swimmer." Rory went white last night, the hot spring in me slipping beneath its water, unveiling over his face. "It is not like me to be the bearer of bad tidings," the gargoyle said. "Bartholomew does not know how to swim." But worry not, he looked up at me, smiling proudly. "She always excelled at drowning." When life gives you lemons. Chapter 20, with war with chisel. So she has to fight in or near the water. Therefore, she cannot use the coin or the inkwell. Benji has the inkwell. Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned this before either because I'm like forgetting when they fought the harried scribe in the beginning. Benji got the inkwell from the scribe. She can't use any of the artifacts because they cannot risk it getting lost in the water because they need these artifacts. Rory tells her though that, you know, it's her decision. Like if she wants to use the coin, she's more than welcome to, but he respects whatever choice she comes to. So she hands the coin back to Rory and Maud offers up her axe, but instead she's like, "Nope, I'm going to use my hammer and my chisel, the two tools that I do know how to use." Kind of smart to go with the thing that you're most familiar with when you're trying to fight someone. Rory pulls Sybil aside really quick before to have a little pep talk. Sybil asks if he'll tell her a story, and she's like, "It's something that we would do, me and the other diviners would do for each other whenever we were sick or scared." So he graciously tells her a story about how his life changed for the better after meeting her. "Where's my tissues?" She tells him it was a good story and then asks him how it ends. "It ends when you kiss me." So cute. Anyway, the fight starts. The oarsman ends up biting into her neck and starts to drink her blood, saying, "You've swallowed so much more of Isling's water than the other one. I could practically taste the spring." So here's where she learns the fate of the diviners. She came as they always do, utterly still. The omen came closer, his steps crashing over the platform. Every 10 years they come. He took another step. "It's the spring water I'm given, their blood. Another step. I have my strength to keep up, my hunger to sate, and so he was upon me now. I take my fill." So this revelation fills her with rage. She reaches inside herself, she pulls out in that rage, she takes the chisel and hammers it straight into the omen's heart. Now she has defeated him at his craft, and as he's dying, he tells her that the diviner he was brought was already dead, and he drank her. So he tells her all of the diviners are dead. That's their fate. After their tenure is up, they're killed and literally offered to all the omens. That's what keeps them starved and hungry and relying on the abyss. He tells her she's dead too as he's dying and uses his aura to shatter the platform that they're standing on, sending her into the churning water. So the next part is called the Chiming Wood, chapter 21, called Sybil Delling. She has a vision of being drowned by the abyss. Rory manages to bring her back through CPR. So she was like almost dead there for a second. She wakes up sometime later alone in an unfamiliar room. They're now in the Chiming Wood. So she runs into Benji and he tells her what his grandfather knew about there being no record of the diviners after they leave the tour. So this reality again fills her with rage, and she's like wandering through the hall and then goes out and she's like wandering around in the woods kind of aimlessly because she's in a little bit of a fog. She's walking near a road and there's a horse and a wagon, and Rory is on this cart with this guy that's driving the wagon. He's shocked to see her covered in blood and barefoot because she's been like running around through the woods. She tells him about the diviner's fates, and Rory listens to her and he lets her grieve this major loss. She's going through it. Like she's unsure how she's going to continue forward in her life. He encourages her. He kind of gets in her face and he's like, "I understand like you're in pain and you rightfully so. You should be in pain. You should be impacted by these losses. However, do something with that pain and don't give up." She tells him like, "I can't keep going." He recognizes that she's truly just grieving at this point, and he says, I'm sorry for the diviners. I'm sorry the people who best understood what you've endured were taken from you, and that so much of living without them feels like dying. But if you hadn't left that tour, I'd have come for you. I'd have killed or stolen or done any ignoble thing to set you free of that place. You are more special than you realize. I don't even know your name, and I would do anything for you." And then she cries in front of him, and she hates herself because she's like, "I don't like showing my vulnerability. I'm not accustomed to showing vulnerability, let alone to a man." So she cries, then bites her thumb until it bleeds, and she holds it up to Rory. "He knew. He always seemed to open a door to himself the moment I needed somewhere to go." Rory brought my bloodied thumb to his lip and said what I'd said to him, to thousands of others from Isling's spring. "What name, with blood, would you give me?" I put my thumb to his lips. "My name is Sybil Delling." His face broke open as if I'd taken my chisel to his derision and shattered it. I feel like this is really sweet how he handles her and her grief. and doesn't belittle her and acknowledges and validates her emotions are real and she has every right to feel them. And then, like he asks for her name and then she gives him like this, remember, like this whole time, like he's not known her name this whole time. He just knows her as Six. That revelation of getting her name finally. I just thought this was really beautifully done scene. Like very well done. Mwah, I loved it. They walk back to Petula Hall together where they're currently staying. And so the cart that Rory had been riding in is carrying her breastplate. So her breastplate is finished. So once she heals, because remember, she got kind of beat up from her fight with the oarsman, she can now wear that armor. Also, they did retrieve the oarsman's oar. Chapter 22, feel but cannot see. So Sybil does not move from her bed for days. She's in her depressed Bella in New Moon phase, okay? She's sitting in a room, doesn't eat, is completely overcome with grief. So the gargoyle, he offers to tell her stories to make her feel better, but she says she has no use for stories at this point. Tragedy and desolation are right here with me. Yes, he went back to humming to himself, but I am here too, Bartholomew. And I think that's a really great quote. I like that the gargoyle is kind of like, he understands that she's upset, but he's unbothered. And he's like, I'm still going to sit here with you in this moment because even though you feel awful and you feel like there's no hope, I'm here too. Like, I'm here with you. And I think that was really sweet. Benji, Rory, and Maud start to rouse her from her melancholy, and they start to help her find ground again. And Maud says, anger is a fine weapon, diviner, she said, quiet enough so the others wouldn't hear, so long as you don't point it at yourself. Now, have some soup. So she starts to realize that these are her new friends, and they're caring for her not because of what she can do for them, but because they genuinely care about her as a person. On the 6th day of being at Petula Hall, she wakes and chooses to avenge her lost diviners and to face the abyss. So a couple days later, Sybil is sulking in the shadows, watching Rory swiftly lift something from a couple woodsmen he's talking to, and she thinks to herself, thief. The gargoyle notes that she's making a face at Rory and asks why she's been giving him the cold mouth, because again, he can't get his expressions correct. Everyone around them can sense that there's this sexual tension between her and Rory. It started the night she told him her name. Grieving in front of him had changed something between us. It felt like a fever looking at him. I was dizzy and thoughtless for it. So the gargoyle tells her that she and Rory have been posturing for far too long. He calls Rory over, much to her dismay. For the sake of my sanity, put Bartholomew out of her misery. Tell her you're in love with her. So they both get really red with embarrassment and deny they're in love. The gargoyle continues and recalls how Rory came for her the night before her fight with the oarsman and how they disappeared for hours. When you returned, you were wet and took off your tunic and threw blankets over yourself. I tried to sleep, but you were terribly annoying. Breathing loudly, sighing, and making little sounds and stirring your bed. I slapped a hand over his mouth. Maud is overhearing this dialogue, and she's enjoying every second of it. When Sybil fought the oarsman and got injured, I think that the gargoyle flew her, Benji, Rory to Petula Hall ahead of the knighthood. So they were waiting on the knighthood to arrive, so that way they could go to their next destination and do the next ceremony and whatnot. They're waiting for the knighthood to show up, and finally they do. So it's time for the next ceremony to begin. This one involves a lot of idleweed burning and basically everyone getting higher than a kite. The noble elder who runs the ceremony brings out a chime, the faithful forester's chime, in fact. So that's where it went all those years ago. Remember how Maud killed the faithful forester? Well, turns out this noble woman is the one that's had the chime the entire time. So when she strikes the chime, it acts as a sort of mind control. Chapter 23, the chime. The chime rings harmoniously and discordantly, both tones having different impacts on everyone. Hamlin rears his ugly head again, trying to force Sybil to smoke the idleweed by blowing smoke into her mouth, which is disgusting. Rory brings this to a halt, grabs Hamlin's face, saying, "Don't touch her again." Thank you for the aggression there. Sybil tells Rory that the chime is the artifact they're looking for. He gives her a mask to cover her face to help against the idleweed effects, but it won't do anything against the chime's influence. So the chime rings dissonant, sending Sybil spiraling into a nightmare of Isling. Then comes another sound. Not a chime, but a scream. A behemoth of a sprite begins to attack, and everyone is as high as a kite, so they're like not functioning correctly or in their right frame of mind. So the sprite eats the noble who has the chime, the artifact falling from her hand, and it catches on the sprite's limbs. The gargoyle flies and tosses Sybil onto the sprite, and she's able to grab the chime. Maud ends up injuring the sprite despite Rory begging for her to retreat. Sybil loses her grip and falls, but have no fear, the gargoyle catches her. Maud fells the sprite, but as it collapsed, it took her with it. Chapter 24, take off my armor. So Maud is alive, but barely. She's severely injured. Benji Benji is deeply distraught. Maud is practically his mother. A day later, Maud wakes up. Maud thanks Sybil and the gargoyle for getting the chime, so they have 2 omens left to go. She tells Benji they should do something to commemorate Sybil on her fearlessness. Benji tells Sybil her loyalty is a treasure and that he will knight her. Big deal. They do the knighting ceremony, but something peculiar happens during it. Benji is asking Sybil to swear her loyalty to the crown and to be his diviner. And Sybil asks, how can she be a diviner when there's nothing to divine? Rory says, you needn't wear the title if it no longer fits you. You needn't do anything you do not wish to. The king's gaze shot to him. Yes, she does. That's the whole point. To swear to me is to swear to my wishes, my aspirations, my kingship. If she vows to be my knight, she vows devotion, to do as I ask, just as you and Maud have. Rory argues they swore loyalty but not mindlessness. He reminds Benji that Sybil isn't there to give up her liberty. Sybil interjects saying, I've sworn to Aisling, and I've sworn to the omens, and I've sworn to my friends, who are now forever gone. I drew in a long breath. I think I would like to stop promising myself away, or else there will be nothing left of me to give, King Castor. So Benji doesn't really love that Rory intervened during this knighting ceremony, but he agrees to Sybil's terms and welcomes her into the knighthood. Hours later, when everybody is asleep, Sybil is wandering around Petula Hall, still wearing all of her armor. She's kind of in a daze. So she goes to Rory's room and gently knocks on his door and asks if he's awake. He calls her name, and so she lets herself in. He asks her if she's okay, seeing that she's still fully armored up. She admits that she just wanted to see him, and he tells her to come here. He's sitting on his bed, and she comes to stand between his legs. He asks why she hasn't taken off her armor. She tells him she feels stronger with it on, and expects him to lecture her for being silly. He rose to his feet instead, put his hands to my face, held my cheeks with an imploring pressure. What happens at Aisling Cathedral is not your fault. The omens and the terrible things they've done are not your fault. Lost diviners, past and present, are not your fault. You have no failures or falseholds to amend for. No vows to tether you, no strength to prove. He soothed my hair as if to comb away the knots of my despair. Especially to me. It's heavy, I murmured. My armor. I know. He took a step back, eyes dropping to my mouth. Let me help you. I do kind of like the imagery of him helping remove her armor, giving her that like soft space to land. So Rory takes her armor off piece by piece, discards it on the floor, and she tells him she wants all of it taken off, referring to her shroud. I want someone to see me, I whispered against his lips. I want it to be you. I'm sobbing right now. This is really sweet. Rory gently loosens it and tells her before it comes off that she can still change her mind. She tells him, nope, not changing my mind. I want you to see me for who I really am. So the shroud falls away and Sybil's eyes stay locked on Rory's, and at first he's at a loss for words. There was wonder in his gaze I'd never glimpsed before, as if seeing my eyes for the first time had profoundly altered his. He tells her that she's the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. Don't tell me what they look like. I pressed onto my toes, swallowed his shaking breath of my own. I'll do anything you ask of me. And again, he said this before, and Rachel, she had it earlier in the book, and then it comes back up again, and I love that because it's so cute and it's so satisfying. And then they finally kissed. How many pages in are we? 303 pages in. They almost kissed, and they sparred, but now they're finally kissing and they're going to unravel. Chapter 25 is just called Unraveling, and that's what happens here. Rory at last gets his turn to throw her down, and he picks her up like she weighs nothing and tosses her onto his bed. This whole scene is full of enthusiastic consent, which we did not get in Silver Elite. I really liked this. Sybil becomes concerned about being able to finish, because remember, she mentioned before, she's never been able to finish with anyone. You don't have to do anything. Rory's eyes were hazy. This isn't a spectacle or a ceremony, he said. It's just you and me, Sybil. Interesting how when you take the pressure to perform away during an interaction like this, it actually makes finishing much easier. So they do finish and they fall asleep together. Sybil wakes up a little while later and she finds that Rory is gone. She gets a flashback to when one disappeared and it causes her to panic. Rightfully so. I'd probably do the same thing. There's this mirror on the table. It catches her eye and she hesitantly lifts it and she sees her eyes for the first time, and to her complete horror she finds that her eyes are completely white. There's no iris, no pupil. They're made entirely of stone, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm just like the omens. She drops the mirror on the table just as Rory comes back into the room, and he asks her why she's looking at him differently. And she says, how could you possibly say I was beautiful? My whisper was a horrible rasp. My eyes, I'm like them. He drops the tray that he has and he tells her that she's nothing like the omens. Sybil says when she woke and he was gone, she figured it was because he was repulsed or regretful about what they had shared. He kisses her hard, tells her she's beautiful, smart, strong, and noble. He only went to get them food. At first he's like mortified because he thinks that she regrets being with him. And then he's like relieved that she thinks that he regrets being with her. And he's like, oh, hell no, girl. And he says, I'm so far the opposite of repulsed or regretful about you that I'm lost. So they continue to unravel the rest of the night. Honestly, good for them. I was pleasantly surprised. I was pleasantly surprised at how beautiful I thought that scene was. Definitely more explicit than her other previous sex scenes in her other duology. So I was kind of interested to see, I was like, is she gonna get more explicit with her writing now that she's getting more comfortable? And this was a more explicit scene because it described things out just a little bit in more detail than her previous ones did. But she kept, like, the interactions were still so beautiful and intimate, but also like hot too. Like, don't get me wrong, like it's not like boring, at least not to my taste. I just thought it was like such a good example of a really healthy first interaction like this between two people. So we're now onto the cliffs of Belladine, the next area they're traveling to get the next artifact. This is chapter 26, You Can Never Go Home. Sybil doesn't want the rest of the world to see her eyes just set, so she continues to wear her shroud in public. Maud is still in pretty rough shape from her injuries, but she is able to travel, but she's uncomfortable. So she admits to Sybil that she feels like a fool. Not because that her body is broken right now and she's healing. She's like, nope, that's not why I feel like a fool. I feel like a fool because I killed a sprite and I continued the cycle of what all the women in my family have done all the centuries before. And so she makes a note that when we're growing up, we think that our guardians or the people before us, they knew all the right answers and their ways were correct. She realizes now that she's an adult, like they don't have all the answers and nobody does. And so continuing certain cycles isn't always like the best route to go. So she's feeling guilty that she killed a sprite and continued the cycle of keeping this weird tension between the sprites and the humans. Again, I think this could have been fleshed out better. It's a really valid point. I just think it needed to be explored more heavily to fully understand like the history and the tensions between these magical creatures and the people. They arrive at the cliffs of Belladine and marvel over the spectacular view. Sybil looks over at Rory to see his reaction, but finds he isn't looking out over the view of the ocean. He was watching me take it all in. I let out a heavy exhale, held his face until I was burning. He's watching for her reaction. Later on that night, Rory slides a note under Sybil's door asking her to meet him at the beach. This made me giggle like a little girl the first time I read it. I was like, oh, we're gonna have a little meet up on the beach. So Sybil, on her way out to meet Rory, is stopped by some of the knights and Benji, who are sitting around the hearth in the inn that they're staying in. Benji asks if she would like to join them as they're having a meeting about the next day's ceremony. Sybil notes he seems different, more confident and sure of himself, but these knights aren't the typical company that he keeps, which is odd to her. She asks why Rory isn't there, and he tells her that he had invited him, but Rory said he'd talk later as he was heading out the door. Apparently he seemed distracted. Another knight says that's for the best because Rory has no sway over the hamlets or noble families. Sybil asks what his point is by saying that. The point, Hamlin said, his tone pleasant but not his gaze, is that Mendacious has nothing to bring to the table. He isn't highborn, he's brash, uncharismatic, and entirely without political value. No real use, save brute intimidation. In a word, a bad knight. First of all, Hamlin is a bad knight for trying to take advantage of Sybil at literally any moment that he can. He can pound salt for all I care. Sybil slaps the wine out of Hamlin's hand and then he just laughs at her. Benji tells him to watch himself because to question a knight's integrity is to question the king's intelligence. Benji again invites her to join them, but she declines. She shoots Hamlin a glower and says, but right now I'm meeting someone else. He's brash and uncharismatic and entirely without political value. The best knight I know. Yes, girl, stand up for your man. So Sybil leaves the inn and finds Rory waiting for her on the beach. Rory reached for my face, took off my shroud. When it fell away, I couldn't bear the reverence that flickered through his eyes. It scared me, thrilled me so much that I wrestled him to the ground. So Rory removing her shroud and being the only one to have seen her eyes so far makes these interactions so much more intimate, you know? Like there's something like truly special that they can share with one another. That particular scene doesn't get explicit, but it's written in such a way that you're like, oh, they're having so much fun together. It's really sweet. So the next morning, Sybil wakes and she can't find the gargoyle at first. She finds him outside looking out over the ocean. He's having a bit of a self-reflective moment, thankful to be away from Aisling while still unable to stop thinking about his home. He realizes so much has changed and things can't and won't go back to the way that they were. Sybil recalls with sadness how she told her other diviners how they would all go to the cliffs of Belladine once their tenure was up. Knowing that will never be a possibility, she mourns the loss of her sisters and the loss of her life as she knew do it. But on the other side of the shroud is life too. So she takes her shroud off and lets it go in the wind. And when she turns around, she sees the gargoyle, Maud, and Rory. Rory bridged the distance between us. Morning light warmed his face. His dark hair caught the wind, and he looked at me with unmasked adoration. I felt an instant tightness in my chest. So they kiss, and Maud hugs the gargoyle, and the gargoyle is like clapping and cheering for them. It's so cute. Oh, I can't handle it. The ceremony put on by the noble families at this particular hamlet is delayed due to stormy weather. So everyone, including the other knights, are left to hang out in the inn. Sybil's eyes at this point are uncovered, and she must deal with looks of fear and disgust that are shot her way by the knighthood and some of the other just regular patrons of the inn. So hours into the night, Sybil is awake when everyone else has fallen asleep. There's a strange clacking noise that wakes her up, and she watches her door open, and this hooded figure comes over and looms over the bed that the gargoyle is sleeping in. Lightning flashes, and she sees the face hidden under the hood and screams. This figure turns for the door, but Sybil darts after it, catching its arm. It flings an arm at her that strikes her hard along the shoulder, then disappears. Chapter 27, Love and Heartbreak. The next morning, Benji, Maud, and Rory are there witnessing her bruised shoulder. She tries to insist that she's fine, but Rory tells her that he will combust if she utters that word. He examines her shoulder, lightly running his lips across it, saying if the Heartsore Weaver were responsible for it, he's going to enjoy killing her. He raised himself, kissing my neck as he went, the air between us immediately warm. Dude, he's so in love with her. He's so infatuated by her, and I am here for it. They decide once again that Rory and Sybil will go about luring the Heartsore Weaver out while Benji and Maud attend the ceremony. When they're alone, Benji takes Sybil aside to clear the air about the other night when Hamlin was being a jerk. He pretty much dismisses Hamlin's behavior, saying that loyalty is political and being his friend has its advantages, which I said yikes to, because we're seeing a change here in Benji, and it's doesn't look great. He asks where her shroud is, and she tells him that she let it go. He doesn't seem repulsed by her appearance. Stone eyes, he murmured. As ever, you're wildly intimidating, a desirable trait, one I'll use to my advantage when I sit on the throne back at Castle Lorik. What an odd thing to say. Sybil nervously tells him that she's not sure if she'll be joining him at Castle Lorik. She doesn't know what comes after they acquire all the omens and has learned not to promise a future that may never come. He asks her if Rory told her to say that, and she's surprised by that, and she tells him no. Trom is a dangerous place, diviner. Benji's voice softened. There are terrible sprites, terrible folk too, but with me, you will be safe. You will garner the power, the awe, the respect you are due. He reached out, patted my shoulder. Everything will turn out well. Have a little faith. Power, awe, and respect from the masses isn't what Sybil is looking for at this moment. Previously, when she was a diviner, she had that pious attitude. That's kind of what she wanted, but really that's not what she wants now. However, Benji's sounding an awful like the abyss at this point, and it's a little chilling. After like a day or so or whatever, the ceremony, the weather clears and they're able to do the ceremony. Sybil remarks to herself that this is like the nicest ceremony they've attended, and it's not like as weird as some of the other ones. Sybil asks Rory what will happen once Aisling loses its power, like what's next for them. And Rory tells her that the world is hers, and he'll go anywhere she asks. She can't ask him to leave the knighthood, but he's already decided for himself that's what he's chosen to do, because he wants to be with her. I'm no one's drudge, the corners of his mouth lifted, but I'll be your errand boy if you ask me nicely. He's blushing over making plans about their future together. Sybil admits that she's aware she's falling in love. So Rory and Sybil sneak off to try and lure out the Heartsore Weaver, but she doesn't fall for their bait. A couple hours later, the gargoyle tells them that they're looking in the wrong area and takes them to a different spot. Underneath a large stone is a hole that leads into some type of cave. And how did he know this was here? He doesn't tell them. He just is like, I know these things. Rory dropped to a crouch. He grasped the stone, made a low sound of effort I liked far too well. Oh, let me. I added my fingers to his and lifted. The stone was heavy. His low sound of effort, that line made me crack up when I read it. So Rory is a bit claustrophobic and not thrilled about leaping blindly into this hole. So Sybil tells him that she can go first. And he says, I know you can, Sybil. He took my hand off his shoulder and brought it to his mouth, pressed his lips over my armored knuckles. But for f***'s sake, permit me. He jumped. They hear Rory land, and he calls up that he'll catch her. Chapter 28, the Heartsore Weaver. The gargoyle, Maud, and Benji follow after them, because now that ceremony finished and they didn't find it, they're like, okay, we gotta find this item. There's 3 tunnels in this cave system. They decide to meet up in 20 minutes to explore the last tunnel together as a group. How do they know how many minutes have gone without a watch? I have no idea. I don't know if that's some magical ability that they have, but I thought about that after I read that. So they split up. Maud and Benji go down one tunnel, Rory, Sybil, and the gargoyle, they go down another. So the trio, They're the ones that chose the correct tunnel. So this tunnel is booby-trapped, and of course the gargoyle is the one to set it off. So the tunnel fills with water and it pushes Sybil and Rory into this pit that continues to fill at an alarming speed. So the gargoyle throws down a rope to them and they climb out. Rory's armor is severely dented and he almost died because he was almost impaled on a spike in the pit. So he realizes after they get back to safety that he lost the coin somewhere in the water. Starts taking off his armor and goes to jump back into the pit to find the coin. And, Sybil tells him, be careful. He kisses her on the mouth, and then another one for good measure. The gargoyle sighed, really, Bartholomew, when are you going to put her out of her misery and tell her you love her? Rory's dark eyes roamed my face. He grinned. And he jumps back into the pit to go find the coin. There's a moth that shows up and Sybil follows after it. She tells the gargoyle to wait for Rory. The moth leads her to another cavern where she comes face to face with the heartsore weaver. One is there, the other diviner, and she is dead and she's laid out on like a stone bench. The weaver isn't human. She looks more like the abyss's gargoyles. Turns out the weaver is the one who made the diviner's shrouds and gowns using the silk from the moth. So there's like silk and moth cocoons like all over this cavern, which is kind of cool. Sybil challenges her at her craft, but the weaver tells her that Sybil has already beaten her and she'll tell her where the loom is if she kills her first. So it turns out the heartsore weaver had known the abyss when she was just a woman known as Aisling. The weaver fell out of sorts with the abyss by telling her that she didn't want to continue being this god. She had forgotten what it was like to be a human and missed it. So the abyss punished her by refusing to give her any more water from the spring. This froze her in time, turning her into a gargoyle. So that's what happens when you stop drinking the water. Sybil is staring at her own fate. If Sybil doesn't continue to consume spring water, she will turn into a gargoyle as well. Which means, if you're making the connections here, that the gargoyle, he must have been a human. Sybil agrees to kill the weaver, so she takes her chisel and she drives it into the weaver's heart. It causes her to crack and fall apart. She thanks Sybil and says the loomstone rests upon the tor. I returned to Aisling when my body twisted beyond recognition, when I became but one of her many stone creatures, an inhuman gargoyle, just like the first diviner I'd made a robe for. So Sybil is confused by this because, as far as she knows, the gargoyles at the tor are sprites. But the weaver tells her no, they're actually human. The ones upon the tor do not tell the stories of who they are. Indeed, they hardly speak, I think, because they do not remember what it is to be human, or maybe they are too afraid to disobey their master. But not the first one. He was a most peculiar boy. What was his name? The first gargoyle she made? This is where we finally realize the bat-like gargoyle that has been following Sybil around is the first diviner, and his name was Bartholomew. Chapter 29, the first diviner. So we get Bartholomew's backstory and essentially the abyss's as well. It's quite sad. Aisling in general, like Aisling Cathedral, was just something that the abyss basically fabricated. It was all a lie. The only thing true was the spring water, which is the real magic that made it all possible. She took Bartholomew as a child and turned him into her first diviner. But Bartholomew was not a particularly obedient child, and once the abyss recognized that, she locked him away, denied him any spring water, starved him until he turned to stone.
She is the worst. She is the worst person in the world.
She gave him a new purpose, to find foundling girls and bring them back to the cathedral. But the ones she liked the best, the ones she lent her hammer and chisel to, the most obedient, she always kept locked away to make into gargoyles.
The worst.
Yikes. Sobbing, the gargoyle apologizes to Sybil for stealing her away and making her into a diviner. She kills the heartsore weaver. They were going to go back to Aisling Cathedral anyway, and now they for sure have to go back because that's where the final artifact is. Aisling Cathedral returned. Chapter 30, the end of the story. They go back to Aisling Cathedral. Sybil shows up with her crew like the Avengers. She comes face to face with her mother dearest and rips her shroud from her face. Here's the description of what the abyss actually looks like. All of her was stone. She had no hair, her skin, lips, cheeks, just as pale as her eyes. Only she was not a gargoyle. Her face was still a woman. She was beautiful, mythical, fearsome, entirely inhumane. So I'm not sure if the reason why the abyss looks like this is because she drank water for so long it turned her into stone and not a gargoyle. I don't really think we get much of a description there. So the abyss takes the loomstone from her neckline and uses it to transport Sybil directly into the spring, slams her down in the water. The abyss admits that the diviners might have a short sentence because, as Bartholomew proved, they're only obedient for a short time. That's so great. Ugh. Then the Abyss goes into her villain monologue about how she went about killing all the other diviners. Apparently the Abyss has never been human. She's never tasted humanity, ate food. She's only consumed the spring waters. But we still don't really know, like, where exactly did she come from? So she fed the diviners to omens because their blood was diluted with spring water, so it would keep them just fed enough, but not fully satisfied. Pretty twisted. The Abyss starts to drown Sybil. She hears this inhuman roar fill the cathedral. Rory rips her from the spring. There's teeth marks in the Abyss's neck. The bat-like gargoyle stood before her, wings spread, baring his teeth, stone shards falling from his mouth. I'd never seen him so monstrous, so befitting of his namesake. A true guardian. Not of Aisling, not of the Tor. Of me. Go Bartholomew! Sybil literally punches the Abyss in the jaw and cracks her face. The Abyss fights back, denting Sybil's armor. They fight back and forth pretty viciously. The Abyss was writhing, seething, spitting chunks of limestone upon the chancel. I looked into her eyes just like mine. Then, with her own tools, with hammer, with chisel, I struck right upon her stone heart. Sybil strikes her until there's literally nothing but dust left. The final omen is now dead. The detail of Sybil punching the Abyss's face and cracking her jaw is pretty cool. I think Sybil's a pretty hefty, strong woman. Chapter 31, The Last Diviner. While Sybil was fighting with the Abyss, everybody else was fighting off all the other gargoyles who were sent to attack. So now they're all just kind of standing there trying to decide what to do. Benji orders for them to destroy the rest of the cathedral. They use the other magical artifacts to bring the cathedral down. So the rest of the knighthood shows up. Benji's voice was full of fire. He came to stand by Rory and the gargoyle and drew his sword once more, as if Aisling had bowed to him prostrate. About time, he swung, his sword lodged in Rory's side, into chainmail, into skin. Rory let out a sharp gasp. Benji! You did not just stab your best friend. You literal backstabber. Benji takes Rory's coin, shoves him to the ground, kicking him in his open wound. Oh my gosh. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, he takes the coin and he throws it at Bartholomew, the gargoyle, shattering his wing and putting fissures in his chest and arms, which that near about broke my heart. Sybil's screaming. Maud lunges for Benji and he stops her and tells her to drop her axe. She asks in a voice brimming with pain what he's doing. Rory is bleeding out on the ground. Bartholomew is still, but he is alive. Benji comes over to Sybil and says, "Come here, diviner. Better change that tone real quick, sir, because I'm about to slap you." Pretty bold of him to say that after just watching Sybil destroy the Abyss, literally with her like bare hands, like punching the Abyss in the face. Anyway, so Rory lunges up and punches Benji's knee. The king repays him back by slashing his face with a sword. Benji tells Rory to like knock it off. He doesn't want to kill him, but you know, that's up to 6. So this bastard will not even refer to Sybil by her name because he knows Sybil's name at this point now too. What a jerk. The omens are gone. All that power has to go somewhere. I want you to help me carry the burden. I want you to come to Castle Lorik, he said simply, like he was telling me a story. I want you to be my queen. Ew, no freaking way. Get out of here, Benji. Sybil reminds him that there's nothing left to divine. He's aware, but dismantling faith takes time, so he plans to use Sybil as the next god to continue the lies. Rory tells Benji Sybil doesn't belong to him and she'll never be his. She will, or she'll watch the knighthood beat and stone you and the gargoyle for the desecration of Aisling Cathedral. Rogue, mendacious, and a mad gargoyle. Benji realized that the one thing he could use to gain power was going to be stripped away from him by his best friend, so he had to put a stop to it. So Benji tells Maud that he has to separate himself from her because she's too noble and too good. For the second time in her life, Maud withdraws from the knighthood. Sybil agrees to Benji's stipulations but says he has to let Rory and Bartholomew go first. She tells Rory to take care of Bartholomew and to take care of himself too. Benji gives them a moment to escape. Maud drags Rory off and Bartholomew follows. "Where are we going?" the gargoyle asked sweetly, dropping pieces of stone from his wing as he followed Maud. Rory caught himself on the wall. I felt his gaze on my face, in the air, in the broken pieces of stone around us. He didn't say it, but I knew. He'd do anything I asked of him. It's then that the gargoyle, he seems to remember kind of like what's happening, so he begins to wail and sob. Maud has to haul him away. "Have a little faith, 6, Benji said, his voice stilted. "Can't you see I've set you free?" The end. I think in that ending scene there, probably one of the most heartbreaking parts for me when I read it is the gargoyle being kind of in a daze. Before he was fighting literal tooth and nail to take down the Abyss, and then when he's injured by Benji, it's like he is dazed and doesn't really know what's going on, and him just being kind of like sweetly like, "Where are we going?" as he's following after Maud, and like chunks of him are falling off. I was like, oh my gosh, that like visual just broke my heart. I'm so so distraught right now. Oh, it's so sad. I actually liked the ending of this book. I suspected Benji to be obviously more of a villain than what he was letting on to, because the hints were definitely there, but I think they were done well. What I wasn't expecting, what took me off guard in the end, was the violence that Benji displayed. Stabbing Rory, kicking him while he's down, and then him taking the coin from Rory and throwing it at the gargoyle and like destroying some of the gargoyle, and then telling Maud like, I can't be around you because you're too noble and too good, and completely exiling those three, and then being like, okay, Sybil, you're gonna be my wife now. Get the frick out of here. Thoughts? There's not a whole lot that I take issue with in this book. I rated it 4.5 stars. Again, one of my biggest issues that I've explained is the world building. It just lacks some of the atmospheric immersive features that are needed. The magic system again was cool, but it felt a little bit disorganized in how it was formed in the first place. After reading this book and then outlining it, I think that it could have been described better. It just felt a little bit convoluted in some sense, like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I remember just kind of being like, I don't quite understand who's the real magical person here. But then at the same time, Benji's grandfather was trying to discover and bring down this religion, and then Sybil, as a diviner, is realizing that her whole religion was a farce. So, it might kind of work in, Rachel's defense, because the whole concept is that like nobody really seems to know where exactly all this came from. So I don't know, it might work. I go back and forth on the two things where I'm just like, I can kind of see it. Rachel latched onto some certain words and used them a lot in this book. There was a couple instances where like she'd use torrid on one page and I flipped the page and it was there again. And I was like, you gotta divvy up some of these words, otherwise it feels like you're just using that a little bit too much. I feel like an editor should have caught that. I really liked the sisterly feeling that we got from all the diviners being together in the beginning. The tone of the book was a little strange when I first started reading it, because it was much different from the other duology, and that's fine. I don't expect these duologies of Rachel's to all be like the same, but I wasn't really sure where it was going. And at first I was like, I don't really know if I like this girlish kind of dumb dialogue that was kind of flung around. But after I read it and got the story in its entirety, I was like, no, actually that was kind of fun. And I think it was fun to see the girls just kind of being girls, even though we know that they live such sheltered, horrible lives. It kind of makes sense. They got let loose somehow, The prose again in this book is really beautiful, but then occasionally a character would say something really out of left field and it would take me out of the story a little bit. So I think that could have been done just a hint bit differently, but again, I did still really enjoy that. There was a lot of focus on religious politics. At first I was trying to figure out, I'm like, oh, is Rachel making an argument for like deconstructing from faith or like any like cult-like mentalities? And I think in an interview she said that she wasn't making commentary on deconstructions. I think the main thing Rachel was exploring was escaping abuse, seeing and recognizing abuse, and then gaining the skills to speak out against it, to stand up against it. I think that was more of kind of the focus that she was taking, not so much a commentary on religion and politics, although that is in there. There is a message to be had there, but I don't think that was the main gist of what Rachel was getting at. The romance I thought was really amazing. Rory may be one of my favorite MMCs now. I did think they were a tad quick to be eyeing each other up in the beginning, but then again, this book is just under 400 pages. For the length of the book, I do think the development was done pretty good. I think the gargoyle was a really great character. He was comedic relief, but he also had some really great hard-hitting quotes and bits of wisdom that I was like, mwah, love that. That's a really good point. And then I really like that we get to see Sybil evolve throughout the story. She starts off as submissive to the abyss, but she's very pious and prideful towards everybody else. And then she's got that martyrdom complex. We see her starting off that way, and then she gradually gains her footing and her voice as the story progresses. Likewise, I really like how Rory, he's quite standoffish to her at first, but he really gives her the space to find her voice, and he very much encourages her to step out and to become the person that he knows that she can. And we'll have to see what happens in book 2, because I think we're going to see Sybil be I think she's either going to go one or two ways. She's either going to adapt that submissive role again in order to appease Rory, or she's going to become an absolute monster and really give him a run for his money. I'm not sure if she'll do both, and then like as she gains an out, she'll start to show Benji that he picked the wrong girl to screw with. I am very, very excited for the second book. I think Rachel said in an interview that this second book is largely inspired by A Knight's Tale, which is a really, really great movie. I'm like, I am sold. I talked for a long time about this book. What is it, Sybil? Chatty one. Yeah? Yeah? Is that so? Thank you everybody so much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate all the support, all the new subscribers that I got. Continue to like, comment, and subscribe so my stuff gets out there. If you liked this book, let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know. I enjoyed it, but I do also understand people's critiques on this book too. I can totally see both. Thank you again for joining me. Thank you again for your patience while I grow a child. Probably one of the reasons why it's been a struggle for me to put video content out quickly is I'm still figuring out how I want to go about doing that. My current way of doing it is not time conducive, and recording takes me so long. I've been filming for about 5 hours again. I'm trying to figure out a more refined system, which is why I'm not pumping stuff out super quickly. So again, I really appreciate the support and the patience while I figure out this YouTube stuff. All right, everybody, thank you so much. I will see y'all in the next one. Toodles!
The stars.